So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was a psychic vampire wielding the life-draining Rinnegan Naruto X Professor Juniper Pokémon. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. It was not a cleansing force of nature, but a perpetual, weeping shroud woven from chakra and sorrow. Each drop that slid down the corroded steel towers and slick, black asphalt was an extension of a god's senses, a single tear in an endless ocean of grief. For the village's inhabitants, it was a constant, oppressive reminder of their leader's omnipresence. For Naruto Uzumaki, it was simply an obstacle to be manipulated. He stood motionless in the shadow of a gargoyle-like drainage pipe, 20 stories above the glistening streets. The darkness clung to him like a second skin, his black, high-collared coat and dark gray shinobi trousers rendering him a void against the city's grim palette. The relentless rain slid off the oil-treated fabric of his coat, but he could feel the probing touch of the chakra within each droplet. It was a net, and he was the one fish it was not meant to catch. But he had learned long ago that any net, no matter how finely woven, had holes. His eyes, a pair of crimson rings rippling with concentric circles, saw the world not as a collection of shapes and colors, but as a vibrant, flowing tapestry of life energy. He saw the city's populace as flickering blue flames huddled in the warmth of their homes. He saw the patrolling shinobi as brighter, more intense torches of white-hot power, their movements casting long, energetic shadows. And he saw the rain, the entire network of it, as a faint, lavender web draped over everything, pulsing in time with a single, colossal signature hidden deep within the city's central spire. Nagato. With a thought, Naruto's own energy signature, a deep and unsettling abyss of violet black, contracted. He drew it inward until it was a mere pinprick, a mote of dust in the storm. It was a trick Orochimaru, in his hubris, had taught him how to hide his power, not by suppressing it, but by compressing it until it was so dense it became invisible to all but the most sophisticated sensors. The very act was a perversion of the control exercises every academy student learned, twisted into a tool for perfect infiltration. His target was below, a fortified data relay station, one of 3 that managed Omegaker's external communications. According to the intel he'd purchased from a to affiliated smuggler, a man whose life force now felt uncomfortably thin, this station held the unencrypted logs of all Akatsuki movements for the past 6 months. For a man with no village, no master, and a very specific set of enemies, such information was more valuable than gold. He did not leap or flicker. He simply stepped off the ledge. For a heart-stopping moment, he fell, the wind whipping at his coat. Then, he extended a hand, palm open, towards the wall of the tower opposite him. His Rinnegan flared. He wasn't targeting the wall itself, but the residual life energy clinging to it, the faint echoes of the workers who had built it, the moss growing in its cracks, the very will of the stone to resist entropy. He pulled. His descent arrested with a smooth, silent transition into a horizontal glide. It was as if gravity had temporarily forgotten its claim on him. He sailed across the 60-meter gap, his boots touching down on the opposite rooftop with less sound than a falling leaf. This was the path of dominion, a subtle manipulation of the world's hidden vitality. Why expend his own energy when he could command the energy that was already there? The relay station was a brutalist cube of concrete and steel, its only visible entrance a heavy, chakra-sealed blast door guarded by 2 shinobi. They stood like statues, their conical hats and rebreathers giving them an insectoid appearance. Naruto saw their bright, white flames of life, alert and steady. Attacking them head-on would trigger every alarm in the sector. A foolish, inefficient option. He moved to the rear of the building, a sheer, windowless wall. Placing his bare palm against the cold, damp concrete, he closed his eyes. Through the path of Genesis, he extended his senses, not his chakra. He felt the life within the walls, the miserable existence of rats in the foundation, the dormant spores of mold, the faint, structural energy of the rebar skeleton. And he felt something else. A thin, green line of energy, moving. A water pipe. He focused on the water inside, on its potential for life. With a gentle nudge of his will, he encouraged the dormant algae and bacteria within the pipe to flourish, to grow. In the space of 3 breaths, A patch of green mold bloomed on the interior wall of the station, spreading with unnatural speed. A moment later, a faint, muffled curse reached him from inside. One of the technicians, annoyed by the sudden, unsightly blemish. Naruto smiled, a faint, razor-thin curve of his lips. The technician's life flame, a dull orange, moved towards the mold spot. The man would likely scrape at it. Perhaps call for a maintenance crew. It didn't matter. All Naruto needed was proximity. The instant the technician was on the other side of the wall, Naruto acted. His right hand, still pressed against the concrete, became a conduit. He activated the path of siphoning. The man inside let out a short, surprised gasp. His orange flame flickered violently, and a stream of it, invisible to all but Naruto, was pulled through the concrete and into his palm. It was a heady, invigorating rush, like the first breath after being underwater for too long. The man's memories, faint and disjointed, bled into him. The taste of his breakfast rice ball, the annoyance he felt for his superior, the correct sequence of hand signs for the station's secondary security lockdown. The technician slumped to the floor, unconscious but alive. Naruto was not a wasteful creature. Death was often less useful than a conveniently placed pawn. With the new knowledge blooming in his mind, he walked back to the front of the station. Weaving the hand signs with fluid, practiced ease. A small panel beside the blast door glowed green. The guards didn't even have time to turn their heads before the 2-ton door slid silently open. He stepped inside. The interior was stark, filled with humming servers and glowing consoles. 2 more technicians were present, their heads snapping up in alarm. Before they could shout, before they could even form a hand sign, Naruto's shadow seemed to stretch. From it, 2 tendrils of pure, violet-black energy, the manifestation of his own life force, erupted. They were not solid, yet they moved with purpose. The path of ruin. The tendrils struck the men in the chest. There was no impact, no sound of a blow. But where they touched, the technicians, Flak Jack, Ketz and the flesh beneath simply unraveled. The complex biological and energetic bonds that held their matter together were instantly and irrevocably decayed. They collapsed into twin piles of gray, formless dust and clattering metal plates. It was over in less than a second. Naruto walked to the central console, his boots crunching softly in the residue of what were, moments before, living men. He inserted a blank data scroll into the port and began the download. As the information flowed, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. It had been clean, efficient, no alarms triggered, no witnesses left. This was his art, his survival, a silent, deadly ballet of stolen life and manipulated energy. Suddenly, a searing pain erupted behind his eyes. It was not a physical assault, but an energetic one. The very air around him seemed to twist, to groan under an impossible strain. His Rinnegan, which saw the flow of life, now saw reality itself beginning to fray. A point in the center of the room began to glow, not with life force, but with its absolute absence, a terrifying, consuming void. An Akatsuki trap. No, this felt wrong, alien. It was raw, untamed dimensional energy, bleeding into his world like dye into water. His instincts, honed by years of running from Orochimaru's labs, screamed at him. Danger. Unknowable. Flee. The data scroll flashed green. Download complete. He snatched it, turning to leave. But it was too late. The void, now the size of his fist, pulsed. It was a wound in the world, and the world was trying to cauterize it. The energy backlash was immense. The last thing Naruto saw was a tidal wave of prismatic light and the feeling of being turned inside out, his own tightly controlled life force ripped away from him as he was pulled into the screaming, silent terror in reality. Sunlight. That was the first thing he registered. Warm, unfiltered, and utterly alien. It was a gentle, persistent heat against his skin, a stark contrast to a Megaker's perpetual twilight. The second was the smell. Not of rain and rust, but of damp earth, sweet pollen, and the clean, crisp scent of chlorophyll. He was lying on a bed of soft, green grass. Naruto's eyes snapped open. Above him, a canopy of unfamiliar leaves, a vibrant, almost cartoonish green, swayed against a sky of the deepest, most placid blue he had ever seen. There were no clouds shaped by jutsu, no oppressive chakra-laden atmosphere. It was just air. Clean, pure, and vibrant with a strange, new kind of energy. It wasn't chakra, it was something wilder, more chaotic, yet fundamentally peaceful. He sat up, his body aching in ways it hadn't since his initial escape from Orochimaru. Every muscle felt strained, as if it had been stretched to its limit and then snapped back into place. A quick, internal check with his Rinnegan confirmed his suspicion. His own life force was dangerously low, the encounter with the rift having siphoned off a massive portion of his reserves. He felt hollowed out, vulnerable. He was in a forest. But it was unlike any forest in the elemental nations. The trees were an impossible mix of species he recognized and others that were utterly bizarre, some with bark that spiraled in rainbow colors. Others that bore glowing, blue fruit. Strange calls and cries echoed through the trees, the voices of animals he could not name. With a grunt of effort, he pushed himself to his feet. He needed to find sustenance, a source of life energy to drain, to begin the process of recovery. A small animal, anything would do. As he scanned the area, his Rinnegan picked up on the local life signatures. They were bizarre, small, intensely bright flames of energy, far more potent than any normal animal of their size should be. One, in particular, was nearby. A small, brown creature, low to the ground. He could feel its simple, instinctual thoughts: forage, nuts, danger, sleep. He began to move towards it, his steps silent despite the unfamiliar terrain. But as he cleared a small copse of trees, he froze. A paved road cut through the forest. It was a smooth, black surface, unlike the dirt tracks or stone paths of his world. And on that road, not 20 meters away, stood a woman. She was tall, with a slender, elegant build. Her hair was a curious shade of brown, tied up in a complex, swirling bun that seemed to defy gravity. She wore a pristine white lab coat over a simple green blouse and a tight, black skirt that stopped just above her knees. In her hands, she held a peculiar device, a flat, black rectangle with a glowing screen, which she was pointing towards the sky as if taking a measurement. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He saw her life force. It was a calm, steady flame of intelligent, inquisitive energy, a soft, sea-green color. She was not a warrior. There was no honed edge to her signature, no coiled tension of a trained killer. And yet, she felt no fear, despite being alone in a forest. Only a focused, academic curiosity. It was this, more than the strange road or the bizarre trees, that put him on edge. This was Professor Araya Juniper's favorite spot for baseline atmospheric energy readings. The ambient radiation from the local flora, combined with the low-level psychokinetic output of the nearby Muna population, created a uniquely stable EMR field. It was the perfect place to calibrate her new dimensional resonance scanner, a pet project she'd been working on for years. The theory was that other worlds existed, and if they did, they should occasionally leave faint, exotic energy signatures in their wake, like the phantom echo of a distant song. Most of her colleagues at the Unova Institute thought it was a charmingly eccentric waste of time. Her scanner, a modified Pokédex, suddenly let out a piercing shriek. Whoa! Juniper nearly dropped the device. The readings were off the charts. A massive, chaotic spike of energy that hadn't been there 5 minutes ago. It was unlike anything she had ever recorded. It had the chara, characteristics of both organic and exotic matter, and a temporal signature that made her head spin. The epicenter was, right here. In this forest. Her scientific curiosity overriding her common sense, she began to walk towards the source of the reading, her sensible heels clicking on the asphalt. Fascinating, she murmured, her eyes glued to the scanner's screen. The decay rate is astronomical, but the residual particles are they self-aware? She looked up from her screen, her brown eyes wide with academic fervor, and saw him. He was standing at the edge of the woods, partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. He was young, perhaps in his late teens, with spiky blonde hair that seemed to defy gravity as much as her own. But it was his presence that was so arresting. He carried hymns, LF with a stillness that was utterly predatory, a coiled silence that seemed to absorb the sounds of the forest around him. And his eyes, even from this distance, she could see them. They were not blue, or brown, or green. They were a stunning, hypnotic crimson, patterned with concentric rings that seemed to draw in the light. Naruto watched her approach. Her life flame, that soft sea green, brightened with curiosity as she saw him. There was no fear, no alarm. It was the most bizarre reaction he had ever seen from a civilian encountering a shinobi. "Hello there," she called out, her voice clear and surprisingly friendly. "Sorry to bother you, but did you just see a bright flash of light around here?" My equipment went haywire. He remained silent, his mind racing. She was speaking a language he understood perfectly. Yet her accent was unlike any regional dialect he knew. Her clothes were strange. Her demeanor was stranger. Was this a genjutsu? He subtly flared his power, sending out a disruptive pulse. The world remained solid. The woman was real. Juniper stopped about 10 meters away, tilting her head. "Are you all right? You look a little, well, you look like you've been through a ringer." She gave him a once-over. Her gaze analytical. His clothes were of a strange cut and fabric, and he was covered in faint scrapes and dust. But it was the way he stood, perfectly balanced and alert. That told her he was no ordinary hiker. Naruto took a step out of the shadows, letting the sun fall fully upon him. He needed information, and this strange, fearless woman was the only source available. "Where am I?" he asked. His voice was raspy from disuse, a low baritone that was quieter than he intended, yet it carried with an unnerving clarity. Juniper blinked. "Oh, well, you're on Route 1, just outside Nuvma town. In the Unova region." She smiled, a warm, disarming gesture. "Are you lost?" The names meant nothing to him. They were sounds without context, places without maps. This was not the land of fire, nor any of the surrounding nations. He was truly displaced. The gravity of his situation settled in, a cold, heavy weight in his depleted core. "Perhaps," he said, his crimson eyes never leaving hers. He needed to be careful. He was weak, in an unknown land, with unknown rules. Suddenly, the grass behind Juniper rustled violently. A creature burst forth, a large, bull-like beast with a massive, dark afro of fur on its head and sharp, wicked-looking horns. It had a ring through its nose and its eyes were glowing with a feral red light. Juniper gasped, taking a step back. "A bouffalante, and it looks agitated. Its territory must have been disturbed by the energy surge." The bouffalante snorted, pawing the ground. It lowered its head, its eyes fixed on the two humans. It was preparing to charge. Naruto's senses screamed at him. The creature's life force was a raging inferno of crimson energy, powerful, wild, and utterly delicious looking to his starving senses. Juniper fumbled at her belt, her hand going for a small, red and white sphere. "Don't worry, oh, drat. I sent my partner Pokémon back to the lab for a checkup. I'm defenseless." She looked at Naruto, her expression shifting from scientific curiosity to genuine concern. "We need to run, now." But Naruto didn't move. He simply watched the enraged beast. Run. He had never run from a fight he knew he could win. And more importantly, he had never run from a meal. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice dropping to a low command. It was not a request. "What, are you insane? That's a bouffalante. Its head charge can shatter solid rock." Juniper protested, her voice rising in panic. The bouffalante let out a bellowing roar and charged. The ground thundered with the beat of its hooves. It was a terrifying spectacle of raw, brute force. A 200-kilogram missile of fur and muscle aimed directly at them. Juniper squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable impact. Naruto took a single, calm step forward. He raised his right hand, his palm open towards the charging beast. His crimson Rinnegan, which had been observing, now began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. He was not interested in shattering rock. He was interested in the life that powered the creature. He activated the path of siphoning, but not the gentle, probing touch he had used on the technician. This was a hungry, vicious, and absolute demand. The bouffalante was 5 meters away when it happened. The air between it and Naruto seemed to shimmer. The creature's red-hot aura of rage and life force was suddenly and violently pulled from its body. It streamed towards Naruto's outstretched hand, a visible torrent of crimson energy that vanished into his palm. The bouffalante's charge faltered. Its powerful legs buckled. The feral glow in its eyes died, replaced by confusion and a sudden, profound exhaustion. It stumbled to a halt, its momentum gone, and collapsed onto the road with a heavy, wheezing groan. It was not dead, merely drained. Left in a state of extreme lethargy, as if it had run for a week without rest. Naruto lowered his hand, a wave of revitalizing energy flooding his system. The hollow feeling in his core began to fill, the aches in his muscles fading. It wasn't a full recovery, not even close, but it was a start. The creature's life force was potent, untamed. He felt a flicker of his strength return. He turned his head slightly, his crimson eyes locking onto the stunned woman behind him. Professor Juniper slowly opened her eyes. The sound of the charge had stopped. She was not dead. She saw the bouffalante lying on the road, panting weakly. And she saw the young man, standing exactly where he was before, his hand now lowered. He hadn't moved an inch, yet he had stopped the unstoppable. Her scanner, which she had dropped in her panic, was beeping frantically on the ground. She picked it up. The screen showed the bouffalante's biosignature, now critically low. And beside it, the young man's signature, which had been a deep, dark void, was now glowing with a faint but steady light. The energy hadn't vanished. It had been transferred. Her mind, a repository of logic and scientific law, failed to find a single theorem to explain what she had just witnessed. It was impossible. It defied thermodynamics. It defied biology. It was, for lack of a better word, magic. And it was the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. Her fear was completely and utterly eclipsed by an insatiable, overwhelming wave of scientific curiosity. She looked at the strange young man, at his impossible crimson eyes that seemed to see right through her, and she knew, with an unshakable certainty, that her life's work had just walked out of the woods. Naruto watched her, his head tilted. Her sea-green life flame was no longer calm. It was blazing, a bonfire of intellectual excitement and awe. She was still not afraid of him. Even after that display, which should have terrified any normal person. She looked at him not as a monster, but as a discovery. What, are you? She breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that was deeply unsettling. Naruto considered her for a long moment. He was weak, stranded, and utterly alone in a world he did not understand. But this woman, this strange scholar with the fearless, inquisitive eyes, was not a threat. She was an opportunity. She was a source of information. And for now, that was the most valuable commodity in the universe. He let the faintest trace of a smile touch his lips. I am Naruto. And I believe, he said, his voice now smooth and steady, imbued with his returning strength, that you and I have a great deal to discuss. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Symbiosis of Minds. The journey to Unova town was a study in profound, unsettling peace. Naruto walked beside Professor Juniper, his senses, honed for a world of ambush and assassination, struggling to process the sheer normality of it all. Children, their life flames bright. Innocent sparks of yellow and orange, laughed as they chased small, bird-like creatures with brown feathers and tufted chests. An elderly man sat on a bench, a cat-like creature with a fastidiously clean demeanor purring on his lap. There were no walls, no sentry posts, no hidden Anbu watching from the rooftops. The homes were not fortified compounds but inviting structures with wide glass windows and colorful gardens. It was a society built on the assumption of safety, a concept so foreign to Naruto that he found it more unnerving than any battlefield. He kept his own power tightly coiled, a black hole of potential energy at his core. The ambient life force of this place was rich and varied, a buffet for his senses. He could feel the deep, slow pulse of the ancient trees, the frantic, buzzing energy of the insect-like Pokémon flitting through the air, and the calm, content glow of the people. It would be trivially easy to replenish his reserves here, to simply walk through the town and gently siphon the excess vitality from his surroundings. But the thought left a sour taste in his mouth. These people, this world, they were not his enemies. Draining them would be like poisoning a well. It was an act of violation, not of sustenance. For the first time in a long time, he felt the sharp distinction between a warrior's meal and a predator's hunt. He would not hunt here. Juniper, for her part, maintained a constant stream of excited, yet precise, commentary. She was no longer speaking to a dangerous anomaly, but to a colleague in discovery. The symbiotic relationship between humans and Pokémon is the cornerstone of our society, she explained, gesturing to a young girl sharing a berry with a small, pig-like creature. We provide shelter, care, and a structured environment for growth. They, in turn, offer companionship, protection, and assistance in labor. It's a partnership that has allowed our civilization to flourish without the large-scale industrial pollution that plagued earlier eras. Partnership, Naruto repeated, the word feeling strange on his tongue. In his world, power was a tool for domination. Summons were bound by contracts of blood and chakra, and tailed beasts were sealed within human prisons. This casual, familial bond was revolutionary. His Rinnegan saw the truth in her words. Faint, shimmering cords of shared life energy connected the people to their Pokémon. Threads of mutual affection and trust. Juniper's laboratory was attached to her home, a modern, two-story building that seamlessly blended wood, glass, and white composite materials. As the glass door slid open with a soft hiss, Naruto was struck by another contrast. Orochimaru's labs had been extensions of his depravity, cold, sterile dungeons smelling of antiseptic and decay. The stone walls echoing with faint screams. This place was the antithesis. It was a sanctuary of science. The main lab was a vast, open-plan room with a floor-to-ceiling glass wall that looked out onto the ocean. Sunlight flooded the space, glinting off chrome fixtures and the polished white floor. The air hummed not with menace, but with the quiet, industrious thrum of advanced machinery. Holographic displays floated in midair, displaying complex charts and swirling genetic models. Along one wall, a series of climate-controlled terrariums housed various small Pokémon, their habitats meticulously recreated. The dominant smell was not of chemicals, but of clean sea air, warm electronics, and freshly brewed coffee. Make yourself comfortable as you can, anyway, Juniper said. A touch of wry humor in her voice. She moved with an energetic grace, her lab coat swirling around her as she began activating various consoles. I need to run a full diagnostic. Energy signature, biological composition, cellular decay rate, anything you're willing to permit, of course. You are not afraid I will destroy your equipment, are you? Naruto asked, his voice flat. He stood in the center of the room, a dark, dangerous figure in a temple of light and logic. Juniper paused, turning to face him. She pushed a stray strand of hair from her face, her brown eyes clear and direct. Fear is a counterproductive response to the unknown. I am cautious. I am also a scientist. And you, Naruto, are the single most significant biological discovery in human history. The potential knowledge you represent outweighs the potential risk. Call it a calculated gamble. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod of respect. She was not naive. She was simply brave in a way he hadn't encountered before. Her courage wasn't born of strength or killing intent, but of an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. He removed his coat, folding it neatly and placing it on a chair. He wore a simple, black short-sleeved shirt underneath, showing lean, well-muscled arms covered in a faint tracery of old, white scars. Proceed. For the next 2 hours, Naruto stood on a circular platform in T. He center of the lab while Juniper's machines worked. Beams of harmless, colored light scanned him. A floating drone with a delicate needle pricked his finger, drawing a single drop of blood that it deposited into an analyzer. He endured it all with a stillness that unnerved Juniper's two assistants, a pair of nervous young men who kept whispering to each other and stealing glances at his crimson eyes. The results that began to populate the main holographic screen were, as Juniper had suspected, impossible. Extraordinary, she breathed, her fingers flying across a light-based keyboard. There's no chakra network, none whatsoever. Your body doesn't circulate energy in the way of a Lucario or a Medicham. Instead, your entire cellular structure seems to be saturated with a unique form of bioenergy. It's as if every single one of your cells is a tiny, self-sustaining battery. She pointed to another screen displaying his genetic code. And this, your DNA is a paradox. It shows markers for accelerated regeneration that should lead to catastrophic cellular degradation, cancer, in layman's terms. But it's perfectly stable. It's being regulated by a protein I've never seen before. One that seems to feed on this bioenergy. Naruto, your body actively consumes life force to prevent itself from tearing itself apart. Naruto listened, his expression unreadable. He knew the truth of his nature. The hunger that was always present at the back of his mind. But to hear it described in the cold, precise language of science was to see himself as a biological specimen, a creature of flawed, monstrous design. My eyes, he prompted, his gaze unwavering. Juniper's attention shifted to the scans of his optical nerves. Her professional composure finally cracked, replaced by sheer, unadulterated awe. They aren't just organs of sight. They are emitting a measurable, yet undetectable, form of energy. It's not psychic energy, it's not aura, it's something else entirely. A perceptive field. The concentric rings in your irises appear to modulate the field's frequency, as if you're tuning a radio. What do you see when you look at me? This was his opportunity to turn the tables. To demonstrate that this was not an examination, but a collaboration. Your life force is a sea-green flame, about 2 meters tall, shaped like a teardrop. Its color is consistent, indicating a stable emotional state, he began. His voice taking on a clinical tone that mimicked her own. However, when you spoke of my DNA, small, bright yellow sparks flared at the edges of the flame. Excitement, intellectual curiosity. The flame pulses in time with your heartbeat, a steady 68 beats per minute. Your left shoulder is slightly dimmer than your right, indicating a minor muscle strain. Likely from leaning over your consoles for extended periods. Juniper and her assistants were frozen, staring at him. She instinctively rubbed her left shoulder, a dull ache she hadn't even console. Why registered suddenly making itself known. Naruto's gaze shifted to the main power conduit running along the ceiling. Your technology also has a life, of a sort. The electricity flowing through that cable is a brilliant, pale blue river. It is chaotic, untamed energy. But once it enters your machines, it becomes ordered. The primary server over there, he gestured with his chin, hums with a soft, purple light. I can perceive the logic paths, the intent, of the machine, as geometric patterns flowing within that light. It is a system of captured, domesticated energy. He then turned his attention to a small, fluffy, white Pokémon in a nearby terrarium. It was a Minccino, and it was currently grooming its tail meticulously. That creature, Naruto said, is currently feeling a deep sense of contentment. Its energy is a soft, pinkish-white cloud. It is also slightly hungry. Not urgently, but it is anticipating its next meal. Its thoughts are simple, a loop of clean, warm, safe, food soon. One of the assistants, a young man named Kenji, let out a choked sound. I was just about to feed the Minccino. It's on the schedule. Juniper stared at Naruto, her mind, so accustomed to the rigid laws of physics and biology. Now grappling with a man who could perceive the universe on a level she had only theorized about. He wasn't just a biological anomaly. He was a walking, talking, quantum observation device. This changes everything, she whispered, more to herself than to him. The study of aura, of infinity energy, it's all been based on indirect observation. You can see it, you can interact with it directly. I can do more than interact with it, Naruto said quietly. He held up his hand, and for a fleeting second, a tendril of violet-black energy, the same terrifying force that had disintegrated the men in Omegakure, flickered into existence around his fingers before vanishing. This is my energy, my life force, weaponized. The two assistants took a hasty step back, their own life flames flickering with fear. Juniper, however, took a step forward, her eyes wide with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Fascinating. A controlled manifestation of pure bioenergy. The potential applications are, she trailed off, her mind reeling. The applications are survival, Naruto corrected her, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, the event that brought me here. What did your machines see? Shaken from her scientific reverie, Juniper nodded and pulled up the atmospheric data from the time of his arrival. A three-dimensional, holographic model of the forest appeared between them, a angry red scar of energy data tearing through its center. The rift event was violent, she said, manipulating the model with her hands. A spontaneous rupture in the local space-time continuum. At first, I thought it was a natural phenomenon, like a lightning strike. But the data shows something else. She zoomed in on the edges of the red scar. Look here, faint traces of a manufactured alloy. One not found on our planet. And these energy particles, they have the signature of a high-frequency containment field. This wasn't a random tear, Naruto. It feels like so. Me-one tried to open a door with a sledgehammer, and you were caught in the splintering frame. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Orochimaru. The timing was too coincidental. The serpent Sannin had been obsessed with dimensional travel, with seeking worlds beyond the reach of the shinobi cages. Had he finally succeeded, only to have the experiment blow up in his face and drag Naruto along for the ride? Or was it something else? Another player in a game he didn't know he was playing? Is the rift still active? He asked. No, it collapsed almost immediately. The energy required to sustain it would be astronomical, Juniper confirmed. But it wasn't the only event. She typed a new command, and the local map expanded, showing the entire Unova region. A second, much larger, and far more stable energy signature flared to life on the map. Located over a massive island city to the south. This appeared moments after your arrival, she explained, her expression turning serious. It's in Castellia City. The energy readings are more controlled, more stable. If the rift that brought you here was an explosion, this one is a controlled burn. Whoever is behind this, that's likely their main base of operations. If you want to find answers, or a way back to your world, that's where you need to go. Castellia City, another name without a map. But now he had a direction, a purpose beyond simple survival. He had a thread to pull. A heavy silence settled in the lab, thick with unspoken questions. The sheer scale of what they had discovered was immense. A man from another world, a creature of impossible biology, and a shadowy third party with dimension-shattering technology. Juniper finally broke the silence, her voice softer now, losing its clinical edge. Let's get some air, and some lunch. My brain feels like it's about to short-circuit. Quote. She led him out of the lab and back onto the path overlooking the ocean. The afternoon sun was warm, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of salt and grass. She handed him a sandwich. A simple thing of bread, cheese, and some kind of cured meat. He ate it slowly, methodically. The taste was foreign, but the energy it provided was real. In your world, she began. Her gaze fixed on the horizon where the blue sky met the blue sea. Is it always like that? The way you were on the road, always ready for a fight. Naruto thought of the fourth great ninja war, of the constant simmering tensions between villages, of his own life spent looking over his shoulder. Peace in my world is just the interval between wars, he said, the statement a simple, unadorned fact. Every child is taught how to kill. Strength is the only currency that matters. Your partnership with your Pokémon, we have a similar concept. We call them tools. The sea-green flame of Juniper's life force dimmed, taking on a tinge of gray. Sadness. Empathy. That's a terrible way to live. It is the only way to live, he countered, though for the first time, the words felt hollow. Standing here, in this world of breathtaking peace, his entire life seemed like a brutal, pointless struggle. This world, which he had initially dismissed as soft and weak, was starting to look like something else entirely. Strong. Resilient in a way that had nothing to do with weapons or killing. As they stood there in companionable silence, Naruto's Rinnegan caught something. A flicker. Chi was at the very edge of his perceptive range, nearly a kilometer away, hidden in a dense patch of forest up the coast. A life signature. It was small, human, but it felt wrong. It was cold, unnaturally suppressed. Like a flame being smothered by a wet blanket. It was the energy of someone trying very hard not to be seen. He focused on it, and for a brief moment, he saw its color, a sickly, fanatical shade of gray-green. The signature was there for only a second before it vanished, blinked out of existence with a speed that suggested advanced technology. A teleporter. He didn't react. He gave no outward sign that he had noticed anything. But his internal calculus shifted. They weren't just being tracked by some nebulous organization. They were being actively watched. He was a target, and by extension, so was the kind, brilliant woman standing beside him. He looked at Professor Juniper, who was now pointing out a flock of bird Pokémon, their wings catching the sunlight. Her flame was returning to its calm, sea-green state. Her mind already moving on to the next puzzle. She was a civilian, a non-combatant, a scholar, and she had, without hesitation, invited a walking weapon of mass destruction into her home. Offered him aid, and treated him with respect. In the brutal arithmetic of his world, such a person was a liability. A weakness to be exploited. But as he stood there, feeling the warmth of the sun and the steady, inquisitive pulse of her life force beside him, a new, unfamiliar calculation entered his mind. She was not a liability. She was the only person in this world who had not looked at him with fear. She was his only source of information, his only guide. Protecting her was not just a matter of sentiment. It was a matter of tactical necessity. He finished his sandwich and turned to face her. His crimson eyes clear and resolute. "Professor," he said, his voice imbued with a newfound certainty. "Tell me about Castellia City. We leave at dawn." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Concrete Jungle. Concrete Threats. The Skiero Bridge was an elegant, sweeping marvel of engineering, a graceful arc of steel and cable that stitched the Unova mainland to the island of Manhattan that was Castellia City. As the high-speed ferry they had boarded in a quaint coastal town glided beneath it, Professor Juniper stood at the railing, a hand shielding her eyes from the sun. Her expression one of fond familiarity. Naruto stood beside her, a silent, dark figure against the brilliant blue of the sky, his senses reeling from an assault more profound than any physical attack he had ever endured. His Rinnegan, an instrument designed to perceive and parse the flow of life in a squad, a village, or at most a small army, was now being subjected to the full, unrestrained roar of a metropolis. It was a tsunami of information, a cacophony of life energy that threatened to overwhelm him. He saw the city not as a collection of buildings, but as a colossal, living organism. Each of the millions of human inhabitants was a unique flicker of light, a frantic, ambitious yellow, a stressed, hurried orange, a calm, contented blue, all swirling together into a vast, shimmering nebula of consciousness. Interspersed within this human galaxy were the Pokémon, their signatures even more vibrant and diverse. The steady, earthy green of the plants in the rooftop gardens, the sharp, electric blue of the city's power grid, the dull, stubborn gray of the concrete and steel itself, all humming with a form of residual, inanimate life. It was too much. The sheer volume of input was a physical pressure behind his eyes. The individual voices of life, which he could normally isolate and identify with ease, were lost in a single, deafening roar. For the first time since awakening his eyes, he was blind. Not from a lack of sight, but from an excess of it. "Incredible, isn't it?" Juniper said, her voice filled with civic pride. "The heart of global commerce, culture, and science. They say if you can't find it in Castellia, it doesn't exist." Naruto did not respond. He closed his eyes, not to shut out the world, but to focus inward. He took a steadying breath, pulling his own energy signature into a tight, dense sphere at the base of his sternum. Then, he began to apply the same principle to his perception. He couldn't stop the wave of information from crashing against him, but he could build a wall. He began to actively filter, to tune his Rinnegan. He instructed it to ignore signatures below a certain threshold of intensity, to categorize others into broad, indifferentiated swaths of color, and to focus only on the immediate 10-meter radius around him. The roaring pressure in his skull subsided, replaced by a manageable hum. The world snapped back into a comprehensible resolution. He could see Juniper's calm, sea-green flame beside him, the anxious, flickering yellow of a young couple arguing nearby, the lazy, purring purple of a purloin sleeping on a crate. He had narrowed his universe from a galaxy to a single room. It was a crude, brute force solution, but it worked. "It is loud," he finally said, his voice a low murmur. Juniper laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "That's Castellia's theme song. You get used to it." The ferry docked with a gentle bump. The moment the ramp lowered, they were swallowed by the city's current. The sounds hit him first. He blare of horns from yellow hover taxis, the multilingual chatter of the crowd, the distant cry of a flock of pea-dove, the upbeat, synthesized jingle of a Castellia cone stand. Then came the smells. The rich, greasy aroma of a street vendor selling hot dogs, the sharp tang of salt and diesel from the docks, the cloying sweetness of perfume from a wealthy woman passing by, and underneath it all, the faint, metallic scent of ozone and electricity. Skyscrapers, true mountains of glass and steel, clawed at the sky, their surfaces reflecting the bustling streets below in a dizzying, distorted mosaic. People of every conceivable shape and ethnicity surged around them, a river of humanity, their Pokémon walking, flying, or perched on their shoulders. A businessman in a sharp suit strode past, a sleek, canine-like herdier trotting at his heel. A group of artists, their clothes splattered with paint, debated loudly while a Smeargle used its tail to paint a caricature on a floating canvas. A line of timber, small gray creatures carrying miniature wooden beams, marched in perfect sync into a construction site, their foreman calling out instructions. This was not just a city with Pokémon in it. It was a city built with them. A true fusion of two worlds. The sheer complexity and harmony of it all was a testament to the societal philosophy Juniper had described. Naruto, a product of a world where different clans and villages were in a state of perpetual, low-grade conflict, could not help but be impressed by the scale of this cooperation. Juniper, ever the efficient planner, had already arranged for lodging. She navigated the crowded streets with an expert's ease, leading him down a wide avenue to a tall, elegant hotel made of white stone and gleaming brass. In the lobby, a graceful, swan-like Pokémon, a swanna, used its long neck to help a concierge retrieve a piece of luggage from a high shelf. Their room was on the 30th floor, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city and the ocean beyond. It was clean, impersonal, and blessedly quiet. The moment the door slid shut, Naruto walked to the large window, placing a hand on the cool glass. He let his perceptual filter expand slightly, feeling the city's pulse through the window. It was still a roar, but from this distance, it was the roar of a distant ocean, not a tidal wave. "All right," Juniper said, setting her bag down and pulling a sleek silver laptop from it. She was all business now. "While you were communing with the metropolis, I had my systems back at the lab running a deep-level analysis of the energy signature. I've managed to triangulate its source." She projected a holographic map of the city onto the wall. A pulsing red dot appeared on the far western edge of the island, in an area marked as the industrial sector. "It's an old power plant," she explained, zooming in on the location. "It was decommissioned about 10 years ago when the city switched to the new magneto-hydrodynamic generator on the coast. It should be abandoned. According to municipal records, it's structurally unsound and slated for demolition." Naruto turned from the window, his crimson eyes focused on the map. A perfect location, isolated, forgotten, with access to a massive, pre-existing power infrastructure. "Exactly," Juniper agreed. "Whoever they are, they're not just squatting. They're drawing a significant amount of power. But they're doing it cleverly. They're tapping directly into the old grid, creating intermittent, low-level drains that mimic system decay. It's a clever way to hide in plain sight." Naruto walked over to the map, his gaze intense. He closed his eyes again, this time not to block the city out, but to search for something specific within its energetic noise. He focused on the pale blue river of the city's power grid, which he had perceived in Juniper's lab. He followed the main arteries of that river, looking for a tributary that felt wrong. It took a full minute of intense concentration, but he found it. A small, almost imperceptible current of energy, bleeding away from a major substation and flowing towards the western industrial sector. It felt sluggish, leached, and it terminated at the exact spot Juniper had indicated on the map. "I can feel it," he said, opening his eyes. "A drain on the city's lifeblood." "Your machine is correct. Their synergy was undeniable. Her technology provided the map, the data, the logic." His perception confirmed it, providing a direct, intuitive understanding that bypassed the need for analysis. They were two halves of a single, highly effective investigative unit. "We will move tonight," Naruto stated, "under the cover of darkness. Can you acquire a detailed schematic of the plant's interior?" "Already on it," Juniper said, her fingers a blur on the holographic keyboard. "Cross-referencing old city planning archives, and done. Sending it to your Pokédex." She paused and looked up, a sheepish grin on her face. "Right, you don't have one. I'll sync it to my tablet. We can review it on the way." As night fell, Castellia transformed. The sun's light was replaced by the gleam of a billion neon signs, painting the streets in hues of electric blue, garish pink, and vibrant green. They left the hotel, dressed now in less conspicuous dark clothing Juniper had purchased. They moved through the city's vibrant nightlife, a world of packed cafes, thrumming nightclubs, and open-air concerts where a Pokémon with a microphone-like head, a Jigglypuff, sang a hauntingly beautiful melody. They took a hover taxi to the edge of the residential district and then proceeded on foot. The further west they went, the more the city's glamorous facade began to peel away. The gleaming skyscrapers gave way to squat, utilitarian warehouses. The cheerful crowds thinned, replaced by the occasional lone watchdog, a Pokémon that acted as a living security camera, its eyes glowing in the dark. The air, once filled with the scent of food and perfume, now tasted of rust, grime, and industrial decay. The power plant was a skeletal silhouette against the starry sky, a hulking, decrepit beast of rusted steel and shattered concrete. A high, chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire, surrounded the perimeter. A large sign, its letters faded and peeling, read, "Danger, condemned. Security will be expecting a frontal assault," Naruto murmured, his eyes scanning the compound. He could see them now, the cold, gray-green life signatures of the guards. 2 patrolling the fence line, 4 more stationed near the main entrance. Their signatures were suppressed, just like the one he'd sensed near Unova town, but in this desolate landscape, they stood out to his Rinnegan like black smudges on a white canvas. They are using some form of technology to mask their presence. It dampens their life force, makes it harder to see. Stealth generators, Juniper whispered, her eyes wide as she looked at her tablet, which was running a sensor suite. Low-level psychic dampening field, standard military tech, but highly illegal for civilian use. These people are well equipped. Their technology is irrelevant, Naruto said with cold confidence. It hides the flame, but not the man. It cannot hide the body he occupies. He pointed to a large drainage pipe that ran under the fence from a nearby canal. We'll enter there. It will be unguarded. They moved with a synchronized silence. Juniper, while no shinobi, was agile and athletic, and she followed his lead without question. The pipe was dark and slick with algae, the air thick with the smell of stagnant water. It opened into a flooded maintenance cellar inside the plant. The interior was a cavernous, labyrinthine space. Massive, silent turbines, coated in rust and grime, stood like the idols of a dead god. Catwalks crisscrossed the darkness high above, and the only light came from the faint glow of the city filtering through the grimy, broken windows. The air was cold, and every sound, the drip of water, the scuttling of a rat, their own soft footsteps, echoed ominously in the oppressive silence. Naruto moved with a liquid grace that was utterly inhuman. His feet made no sound on the grated metal floor. His eyes, glowing faintly in the gloom, pierced the darkness, seeing not just the physical layout but the very energy of the place. He saw the faint, residual heat signatures of the guards' patrol routes. He saw the active power lines, glowing a malevolent red, snaking their way through the defunct machinery towards the plant's core. Juniper followed close behind, her tablet providing the map, her scientific mind cross-referencing Naruto's intuitive observations with the plant's schematics. The main generator hall should be directly ahead, she whispered, her breath misting in the cold air. That's where the energy readings are most concentrated. As they rounded a corner, Naruto held up a hand, stopping her instantly. Up ahead, 2 guards in sleek, gray combat uniforms with strange, angular helmets stood talking in low voices. They were equipped with futuristic-looking rifles that pulsed with a faint inner light. Plasma weapons. 2 tangos, 30 meters, behind that defunct transformer. Juniper confirmed, her voice barely audible. Naruto didn't even look at her. He was focused on the environment. His gaze fell upon a high-pressure valve on an old steam pipe directly above the guards. The pipe was cold, dormant, but the metal itself, like all things, had a life force, a structural integrity. He focused his will on it, on the concept of decay. Rust, weaken, break. With a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot, the valve fitting shattered. A shower of rust and metal fragments rained down on the guards. They yelped in surprise, their Ning kicking in as they raised their rifles, searching the darkness for a threat. It was the only distraction Naruto needed. He moved. He wasn't just fast. He was a blur, a ripple in the darkness. Beef. Or the guards could pinpoint the source of the noise, he was upon them. He didn't use a weapon. His hands were his weapons. A precise, open palm strike to the chest of the first guard. It was a gentle tap, almost casual. But the man's eyes rolled back in his head as his life force was violently siphoned, his body slumping to the ground, unconscious. The second guard turned, his rifle coming up, but Naruto was already there. He grabbed the barrel of the plasma rifle. The guard pulled the trigger. There was a faint, pathetic whine, and the glowing light within the weapon died. Naruto had drained the weapon's energy cell in less than a second. The guard stared in disbelief at his useless rifle, and then Naruto's other hand chopped down on the side of his neck, a single, precise blow that dropped him without a sound. Juniper watched, her heart pounding. It had taken less than 3 seconds. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and brutally efficient display of power. They pressed on, deeper into the plant's metallic heart. They found the main generator hall. It was a vast, cathedral-like chamber. In its center, where the main turbine should have been, was the source of the energy readings. It was a massive ring of polished, black metal, suspended in a crackling field of blue energy. Wires and conduits snaked from it, hooking into the old power grid like a parasite. In the center of the ring, the air shimmered. And through it, Naruto could see a distorted, wavering image of a rocky, windswept landscape under a gray sky, his world. Surrounding the device were a dozen more gray-clad soldiers, all armed with plasma rifles. And a commander, a tall, severe-looking man with a cybernetic eye that glowed with a faint red light. "Seal the entrance," the commander barked, his voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "We've been breached. They're here." Heavy blast doors slammed down behind them, trapping them in the chamber. The soldiers raised their rifles, red targeting lasers slicing through the darkness. "It seems a quiet infiltration is no longer an option," Naruto stated calmly, stepping forward into the dim light, placing himself between the soldiers and Juniper. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," the commander sneered. "This project is beyond your comprehension. Your project is an anchor, a crude and unstable one," Juniper called out, her voice steady despite the dozen rifles aimed at them. Her scientific indignation seemed to outweigh her fear. "You are ripping a hole in the fabric of reality with no regard for the cascading temporal effects." Naruto allowed himself a thin smile. "You heard the professor. Surrender, and I will allow you to live." The commander laughed. "Kill them." The air filled with the high-pitched whine of charging plasma. As the first volley of brilliant, white-hot bolts of energy screamed towards them, Juniper noticed something. A small, yellow, rodent-like Pokémon with a black lightning bolt for a tail, a Blitzel, was cowering behind a bank of capacitors. Its body trembling and sparking with fear, drawn in and trapped by the machine's immense electromagnetic field. While the soldiers focused on Naruto, Juniper acted. "Blitzel," she called out, her voice sharp and clear. "That main power conduit, the unshielded one. Use your shock wave." The Blitzel, startled but recognizing the confident command of a human who understood it, reacted on instinct. It unleashed a wave of crackling electricity that struck the thick, glowing power cable. The cable sparked violently, and the lights in the chamber flickered. The portal machine whined, its energy field wavering for a crucial second. That second was all Naruto needed. He didn't dodge the plasma bolts. He met them. He thrust his right hand forward, his Rinnegan blazing. Path of siphoning. A vortex of pure, violet-black energy materialized in front of his palm. It was not a shield that blocked, but a mouth that consumed. The incoming plasma bolts, projectiles of coherent, weaponized life energy, were drawn into the vortex. They did not explode. They were unraveled, their energy siphoned, absorbed, and redirected into Naruto's own reserves. He felt a searing, exhilarating rush of power, the raw, untamed energy of a miniature sun flooding his system. His body glowed with a faint, violet aura. The soldiers stared in stunned silence, their weapons useless. The commander's cybernetic eye whirred, analyzing the impossible sight. What is he?" One of the soldiers stammered. "He is the end of your operation," Naruto said, his voice a low growl. The absorbed energy coursed through him, demanding release. He channeled it, manifesting it. A blade of the same violet-black energy, a meter long and humming with the power of decay, formed in his left hand. He moved. He was faster than before, his body supercharged by the stolen energy. He flowed through the soldiers like a phantom, his blade a whisper of death. It did not cut, it merely touched. And where it touched, armor, weapons, and flesh dissolved into gray dust. He was a reaper, harvesting men instead of wheat, his movements a dance of absolute, terrifying lethality. In 10 seconds, all the soldiers were gone, leaving only faint gray smudges on the floor. Only the commander remained, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. He screamed in rage and desperation, grabbing a much larger weapon from a nearby crate, a heavy plasma cannon. He leveled it, its triple-barreled maw glowing with an intense, blinding light. "To hell with you," he roared, and fired. A massive, incandescent sphere of sun-hot plasma erupted from the cannon, so bright it bleached all color from the room. It was too big, too fast, too powerful to absorb completely. Naruto's instincts took over. He appeared in front of Juniper, shielding her with his body. He brought both hands up, creating a larger, more desperate vortex of siphoning energy. He could feel his own life force burning as fuel to contain the overwhelming power of the blast. The cannonball of plasma struck his shield. The sound was a deafening roar of tearing reality. Light and shadow battled for dominance. He felt a searing pain as his shield buckled, a sliver of the raw energy splashing past his defense and catching his shoulder. The fabric of his shirt vaporized, and his skin blistered and blackened in an instant. But his shield held. He roared, his own power flaring to meet the challenge. He absorbed the blast, the sheer volume of energy threatening to tear him apart from the inside. He grit his teeth, the veins on his temples standing out. He had to release it. With a final, desperate act, he redirected the torrent of absorbed energy not at the commander, but at the portal machine itself. A colossal beam of pure, chaotic, violet energy erupted from his hands and struck the metal ring. The result was cataclysmic. The portal machine shrieked, a high-frequency scream of tortured metal and collapsing dimensional physics. The image of his world within the ring shattered like glass. The black metal of the ring began to glow red, then white, then it simply overloaded. "We need to leave. Now," Naruto grunted, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the white-hot agony in his shoulder. He grabbed Juniper's hand and ran. The commander was vaporized in the initial shockwave as the portal machine detonated. A wave of force and heat chased them down the corridors, the entire power plant groaning as it was torn apart from the inside. They burst out of a side exit just as the main structure collapsed in on itself in a titanic implosion of fire, smoke, and screaming metal. They lay on the grimy pavement outside the fence, panting for breath as the last echoes of the explosion faded, leaving only the sound of sirens in the distance. Juniper pushed herself up, her ears ringing. She was unharmed, shielded by Naruto's body. She looked at him. He was leaning against a concrete barrier, his face pale, his breathing ragged. The wound on his shoulder was horrific, a third-degree burn that should have crippled him. But as she watched, a faint violet aura enveloped the wound. The blackened skin began to flake away, replaced by fresh, new tissue underneath. His accelerated healing, powered by the life force he wielded, was already at work. She felt a complex, dizzying cocktail of emotions, terror at the violence she had just witnessed, relief at their survival, and an overwhelming, profound sense of awe at the man beside her. He had protected her, had taken a blow meant for her, and had faced down impossible odds with a terrifying, unshakable calm. She reached into her medical kit, her hands shaking slightly. "Here," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Let me at least clean it. Even you can get an infection." He began to gently dab an antiseptic wipe on the edges of the rapidly healing wound, her fingers brushed against his skin. She felt a faint, tingling warmth, a current of energy that was both intimidating and strangely reassuring. Naruto watched her, his crimson eyes intense. In the flickering light of the burning wreckage, he examined the contents of a small, reinforced data pad he had managed to snatch from the commander's belt in the final moments. Most of the data was corrupted by the explosion's electromagnetic pulse, but one file remained, a single, protected mission directive. He angled the screen so Juniper could see it. It was a map of his own world, a map of the elemental nations, and there was a single, pulsing marker on it, deep within the borders of the land of Earth. The mission text was simple and chilling. Phase 2. Secure primary anchor. Target: Iwagakure. Extract or eliminate Tsuchikage. Juniper's breath hitched. "They're not just opening a door," she whispered in horror. They're planning an invasion. Naruto's jaw tightened, the pain in his shoulder forgotten. This was no longer about finding his way home. This was an attack on his world, orchestrated by a shadowy enemy from another. He was the only one who knew. The only one who could stop it. He looked from the burning plant to Juniper, her face illuminated by the data pad's glow, her expression a mixture of fear and determination. She was in this now, as deeply as he was. His mission had changed, and he was no longer alone. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Stone Will. The world did not end in a bang, but in the deafening shriek of collapsing physics. The portal machine, force-fed a sun's worth of raw, chaotic energy, was tearing itself and the space around it apart. Shrapnel, superheated to a liquid state, flew through the air like incandescent rain. The concrete floor buckled, and the very air grew thin, pulled into the hungry, unstable rift that flickered where the machine had been. It was no longer a stable gateway. It was a mortal wound in reality, moments from collapsing into nothingness. They're planning an invasion. Juniper's voice was a strained whisper, barely audible over the roar of the dying portal and the approaching sirens. The data pad's screen, displaying the chilling map of the elemental nations, was the only steady light in the chaos. Naruto's mind, a machine of tactical calculation, processed the variables in a nanosecond. The enemy, this rogue faction, likely manipulated by Orochimaru, had lost their foothold in this world. But their primary objective, their anchor, was in his. The sirens were closing in. Soon, this area would be swarmed by this world's authorities. They would be captured, questioned. He would be classified as a threat, a metahuman, an anomaly to be dissected in a laboratory far more sophisticated than Orochimaru's. They would lose time they did not have. There was only one path forward. It was insane. It was suicidal. It was necessary. The portal, he said. His voice a low command. He pushed himself to his feet, the half-healed burn on his shoulder screaming in protest. The violet aura around the wound flared as he forced his own life energy into the damaged tissue, accelerating the regeneration. Juniper stared at him, then at the flickering, violent tear in space. It was not the calm, shimmering doorway from the generator hull. It was a maelstrom of angry, prismatic light, spitting sparks of raw energy. Naruto, that's not a door anymore, it's a woodchipper. The energy fluctuations are completely unstable. Stepping into that isn't teleportation, it's suicide. Staying here is a cage, he countered, his crimson eyes locking onto hers. My world is the target. The Tsuchikage is the target. If he falls, Iwagakure will be thrown into chaos, creating the perfect opportunity for this enemy to establish their beachhead. I am the only one who can warn them. His gaze softened for a fraction of a second. You do not have to come. This is not your fight. Juniper looked from his determined face to the inferno of the collapsing plant, then back to the shrieking portal. Her world was one of order, of peer-reviewed papers and predictable outcomes. Everything she had witnessed in the last 24 hours had systematically dismantled that reality. She had seen him drain the life from a creature, turn technology to scrap with a touch, and absorb energy that could power a city. Now, he was about to leap into a dimensional hurricane. The logical, scientific part of her brain screamed that it was madness. But the part of her that had watched him shield her with his own body, the part of her that had felt the quiet, immense strength in his presence, made a different calculation. He was heading into the unknown, to a world of assassins and perpetual war, to fight an enemy that transcended both their homes. Leaving him to do that alone felt like a betrayal not of logic, but of a far more fundamental principle. You're a terrible travel agent. You know that, she said, a shaky but determined smile gracing her lips. She pushed herself to her feet, brushing the grime from her trousers. And for the record, when a scientist discovers a new, paradigm-shifting phenomenon, they don't let it run off to another dimension without them. I'm going. A flicker of something, surprise, respect, perhaps something more, passed through Naruto's eyes. He gave a single, sharp nod. Stay close. Whatever happens, hold on to me. He grabbed the data pad, shoving it into a pocket of his trousers. Then, without a backwards glance, he sprinted towards the vortex, pulling Juniper along with him. The heat was immense, the sound a physical blow. They leapt from the shattered edge of the loading bay, across a chasm of buckled concrete, and plunged directly into the heart of the dimensional storm. The transition was not a step. It was a detonation. All sensation was replaced by a singular, overwhelming agony of being. Naruto felt his very essence. The tightly bound core of his life force, being shredded, pulled in a million directions at once. It was the antithesis of his controlled siphoning. This was a chaotic, universal drain. He wrapped his own energy around Juniper like a cocoon, a desperate, instinctual act of shielding, even as he felt his own reserves being torn away. He saw not light or darkness, but the raw, unfiltered code of reality, strings of impossible geometry, colors that had no name, the sound of exploding stars and dying galaxies. It was a glimpse into the cosmic engine, a sight no mortal mind was meant to endure. Then, just as abruptly as it began, it was over. They were spat out of the non-space and crashed onto hard, unforgiving ground. The impact knocked the breath from their lungs. Naruto landed in a crouch, his body absorbing most of the impact, while Juniper stumbled and fell to one knee beside him. For a moment, there was only the sound of their own ragged breathing and the howling of the wind. The air itself was the first sign of the profound change. It was thin, sharp, and tasted of dust and stone. It lacked the thick, humid vitality of Unova's atmosphere. It was abrasive, and it was saturated with a familiar, tingling energy that blanketed everything. Chakra. Naruto slowly raised his head, his Rinnegan recalibrating to this new, yet familiar, world. They were in a high mountain pass. Jagged peaks of gray and brown rock clawed at a sky the color of lead. There was no green here, save for a few hardy, twisted shrubs clinging tenaciously to the cliff faces. The wind was a physical presence, a relentless, scouring force that carried with it the chill of high altitudes and the grit of the mountains themselves. The light was harsh, a flat, unforgiving glare that offered no warmth. This was the land of Earth, a land as stubborn, stark, and uncompromising as its people. Atmospheric pressure, significantly higher, Juniper managed, her voice raspy. She was already pulling a small, handheld sensor from her pocket, her scientific instincts a comforting reflex in the face of this terrifying disorientation. Oxygen content is roughly the same, but there's a background radiation I've never seen before. It's pervasive. It seems to be resonating with the local geology. Chakra, Naruto said, his voice flat. He could feel it not as radiation, but as a living, breathing part of the world. It flowed through the rock, was carried on the wind, and settled in the very marrow of his bones. After the energetic vibrancy of Unova, it felt sluggish, heavy, and deeply melancholic. It is the energy of my world. You are feeling the scars of 1,000 wars fought on this soil. Before Juniper could ask for clarification, a sharp, whistling sound cut through the wind. Naruto's head snapped up, his hand blurred, snatching something from the air an inch from Juniper's face. He opened his palm. Lying there was a kunai, its triple-bladed point still quivering from the impact. It was not a warning shot. It had been aimed to kill. Suddenly, they were surrounded. They did not flicker or shimmer into existence. One moment the rocks were empty, the next, a DOZ-N figures were standing on the high ground around them, their forms clad in the distinctive red and brown uniforms of Iwagakure shinobi. They wore full-face masks and flak jackets, and they moved with the silent, coordinated precision of a pack of wolves. Their life flames, as seen by Naruto's eyes, were sharp, disciplined points of white-hot energy, hardened by training and battle. A single figure leapt down from the highest rock, landing lightly on the path before them. She was younger than the others, perhaps Naruto's age, and wore no mask. Her face was framed by short, dark hair, and her eyes, a sharp, intelligent brown, missed nothing. She was dressed in a modified Iwa uniform, a mesh shirt visible under a cropped, sleeveless red tunic and a short brown skirt over leggings. Her hands were wrapped in bandages, and she carried herself with an air of bored, unshakable confidence that spoke of high birth and proven skill. This was Kuretsuchi of the Both Scales, granddaughter of the third Tsuchikage. She tilted her head, her gaze sweeping over them with casual disdain. She took in Juniper's strange, impractical clothes and Naruto's dark, foreign attire. Her eyes lingered for a moment on the Rinnegan, a flicker of surprise crossing her features before being replaced by suspicion. Well, Look what the wind blew in, she said, her voice a lazy, sarcastic drawl. You're a long way from home, whoever you are. This is a restricted military zone. The penalty for trespassing is death. So, you've got about 10 seconds to give me a very good reason why I shouldn't have my me. And turn you into a pair of matching stains on the landscape. Start talking. Juniper, recognizing this as a first contact scenario, stepped forward, her hands raised in a universal gesture of peace. Greetings. My name is Professor Araya Juniper. We mean you no harm. There has been a form of transportational mishap. We are here to deliver an urgent warning to your leader, the Tsuchikage. Karatz. Uchi stared at her as if she'd just started speaking in frog croaks. She let out a short, derisive laugh. Professor, you look more like a Konoha librarian who took a wrong turn at the border. And, you think you can just waltz up to Gramps Onoki with a warning? Lady, you've got guts, I'll give you that. Stupid, but gutsy. Her sharp gaze shifted to Naruto, who had remained perfectly still, crimson eyes watching her with an unnerving intensity. And you, what's your deal? You the professor's trained pet. Those eyes are something special. Some new, fancy dojutsu. Or are you just another one of Orochimaru's freaks who crawled out from under a rock? The name Orochimaru hit Naruto like a physical blow, confirming his suspicions. The serpent's influence was the thread connecting these events. But he showed no reaction. His face an impassive mask. He understood this situation perfectly. This was not a negotiation of equals. This was an interrogation at blade point. Juniper's logical, diplomatic approach was a foreign language here. Kuretsuchi didn't deal in reason, she dealt in strength and intent. Naruto took a step forward, moving slightly in front of Juniper. My name is Naruto. We are not your enemies. We have vital intelligence concerning an imminent, externally sourced attack on Iwagakure. The target is your Tsuchikage. We need to speak with him directly. Now, his voice was calm, devoid of fear or supplication. It was a statement of fact, delivered with an authority that seemed to momentarily surprise Kuretsuchi. She recovered quickly, a smirk playing on her lips. Oh, a warning. How kind of you. Let me guess, you want us to lower our defenses, invite you in for tea, and then you and your friends can stab us in the back. I've seen that trick before. It's page 3 of the How to Invade a Hidden Village for Dummies handbook. This is not a trick, Naruto stated, his patience wearing thin. The enemy we tracked here possesses technology you have never seen. They can move between worlds. They were responsible for the energy signature your sensors must have picked up moments ago. Kuretsuchi's smirk faltered. She glanced at one of her men, who gave a subtle nod. They had detected the portal's chaotic energy signature. That part of his story, at least, was true. But it did little to quell her suspicion. So you're the source of that mess. Even better, she sneered. You show up on our doorstep out of a freak energy storm, spout some nonsense about an invasion from another world, and expect me to believe you. You look less like a savior and more like the advanced scout. Your skepticism is logical, Naruto conceded. But it is a luxury we do not have time for. Every moment we waste here arguing, the enemy is closer to their goal. Kuretsuchi crossed her arms, her expression hardening. All right, pretty eyes, I'm tired of this game. Here's how it's going to work. You're going to submit to a full interrogation by our T&I unit. We'll peel back your mind layer by layer. And if your story checks out, maybe I'll pass a message on to the Tsuchikage. If you're lying, well, the T&I boys love getting new toys. Unacceptable, Naruto replied instantly. Your mind walkers will see things they are not equipped to understand, and it will waste more time. We will speak to Onoki directly, or not at all. Kuretsuchi's eye twitched. The sheer aroga, NCE of this unknown boy was starting to get under her skin. No one, not even Jonin from allied villages, spoke to her with such unyielding defiance. You're in no position to make demands, she said, her voice losing its lazy drawl and taking on a dangerous, flinty edge. You're surrounded, outnumbered, and on my turf. Numbers are irrelevant when they lack the strength to matter, Naruto said, his gaze sweeping over her shinobi. He wasn't just looking at them, he was dissecting them. He saw the precise flow of chakra in their bodies, the way they distributed their weight, the slight tensing of muscles that preceded a jutsu. He saw their strengths, their weaknesses, and the 15 different ways he could kill them all before they could even complete a single hand sign. That was the last straw for Kuretsuchi. This wasn't just confidence. This was a direct, blatant challenge to her authority and the strength of her village. Her pride, and her duty, demanded an answer. "Is that right?" she said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "Big words. I've found that boys with big words usually have very little else to back them up. So how about this? You want to prove you're on our side. You want to prove you've got the strength to be worth my time. Then prove it, right here, right now." She settled into a low, fluid stance, her hands forming a familiar seal. "You and me. You win, I'll take you to see Gramps. You lose, and I'll take your head. What do you say, Naruto?" Juniper gasped. "A fight, that's your solution to a diplomatic crisis. Around here, Lady Karatsu," Kai said without taking her eyes off Naruto, "it's the only diplomacy that matters." Naruto's expression did not change. This was a language he understood perfectly. A test, a shinobi's way of cutting through the lies and getting to the truth of a person's power. It was inefficient, but it was also inevitable. "I will not kill you," Naruto stated. "But I will defeat you." Kuretsuchi let out a sharp bark of laughter. "I'm starting to like you, pretty eyes. You're either the strongest person I've ever met, or the most delusional. Let's find out which." She didn't wait for an answer. She stomped her foot on the ground, and the rock beneath Naruto's feet suddenly liquefied, turning into a bubbling, gray sludge. Earth release. Earth flow river. Naruto didn't leap away, as the ground gave way. He simply pushed a controlled burst of his own life force through the soles of his feet. The repulsive force of the path of dominion met the jutsu, creating a solid, stable platform for him even as he ground around it turned into a churning mire. He stood perfectly still, seemingly floating on the surface of the mud river. Kuretsuchi's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't just dodged, he had neutral. Ized her jutsu with no hand signs and no visible chakra flare. She pressed the attack, her hands a blur of seals. Lava release. Ash lime congealing technique. She spat a glob of grayish-white substance from her mouth. It wasn't lava, but a quicklime cement that flew through the air and exploded just in front of Naruto, creating a massive, dense cloud of caustic ash. The jutsu was designed to blind, suffocate, and trap an opponent in fast-hardening cement. From within the cloud, there was no sound of choking, no panic movement. Instead, a calm voice spoke, seemingly from every direction at once. "Your technique is impressive. You mix earth and fire natures to create a composite element. The ash is a diversion, meant to obscure my vision while the cement particles in the air adhere to my body, hardening to restrict my movement. A clever combination." The ash cloud suddenly imploded, collapsing in on itself as if drawn into a vacuum. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing dust, completely untouched. He had used a miniature, controlled universal pull to draw the cloud into a dense, harmless ball at his feet. Kuretsuchi's smirk was gone, replaced by a frown of intense concentration. This man, he wasn't just powerful. He was analyzing her jutsu, breaking it down in the middle of combat. "Less talking, more fighting," she snarled, slapping her palms together. Lava release. Vulcanized rubber wall. A thick, black, resilient barrier erupted from the ground in front of her. She used it as cover, forming new hand signs. She was no fool. Head-on attacks weren't working. She needed a new angle. A defensive measure. Naruto's voice observed calmly from behind her. Kuretsuchi whirled around, her eyes wide with shock. He hadn't moved. He had been on the other side of her wall. How did he? There was no flicker, no sign of a body replacement jutsu. He had simply been there. It was as if he had teleported, but her senses had detected no space-time ninjutsu. Before she could react, he was upon her. It was not an attack, but a deconstruction of her stance. His movements were a blur of fluid, precise strikes. He didn't punch or kick. He used the edges of his hands, his knuckles, his fingertips. A tap to her wrist sent her off balance, a gentle nudge to her elbow disrupted her chakra flow, a precise strike to her shoulder forced her to drop the kunai she had drawn. Every move was calculated, Designed not to injure, but to control. It was a taijutsu style she had never seen, economical and utterly overwhelming. She was an elite kunoichi, a master of hand-to-hand combat. But she felt like an academy student sparring with a cage. She was outclassed on a level she couldn't comprehend. He was anticipating her every move, countering her counters before she had even thought of them. In a final, desperate move, she channeled a massive amount of chakra to her fist, encasing it in a layer of molten rock. Lava release. Searing migraine. She swung wildly, a powerful haymaker that could melt steel. Naruto didn't meet the blow. He flowed around it. His hand darted out, not at her fist, but at her outstretched arm. His fingers gently touched the back of her elbow. And then he pulled, not her body. He pulled on the life force within her, the chakra she was channeling. The path of dominion exerted its irresistible will. The massive amount of lava-natured chakra he had sent to her fist was violently redirected. It surged backwards through her own chakra coils, uncontrolled. She cried out in pain and shock as her own technique backfired, the intense heat scorching her arm from the inside. The molten rock around her fist dissolved as she lost control of the jutsu. In that moment of agony and confusion, Naruto stepped in. A single, precise chop to the back of her neck. Kuretsuchi's vision went black, her legs gave out, and she collapsed, not into the dirt, but into the arms of the man who had just so effortlessly, so completely, defeated her. Naruto held her for a moment before gently laying her on the ground. He looked up at the dozen Iowa shinobi who were frozen on the rocks above, their weapons drawn, their faces a mixture of shock and horror. Their leader, the pride of their village, had been defeated in less than a minute, without the enemy suffering so much as a scratch. He stood up, his crimson eyes sweeping over them. There was no triumph in his expression, only a quiet, unshakable authority. The demonstration is over, he said, his voice cutting through the wind. Now, take me to your Tsuchikage. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Gaze of the Tsuchikage. The journey to the heart of Iwagakure was not a walk, but a descent. They were led from the wind-scoured mountain pass into a network of tunnels carved directly into the living rock of the mountain range. The air grew still and cool, carrying the faint, metallic scent of forged steel and the earthy smell of damp stone. The only light came from glowing, chakra-infused crystals set into the rough-hewn walls, casting long, dancing shadows that made the Iowa shinobi escort seem like phantoms guarding the entrance to Upadana Naraka. Naruto, his senses no longer overwhelmed by a city's roar but sharpened by the oppressive silence, felt the immense weight of the mountain above them. It was a fortress in the truest sense of the word, a testament to a will that did not build upon the land, but bent the land itself to its purpose. Juniper, ever the scientist, was fascinated. She ran a hand along the tunnel wall, her expression a mixture of awe and academic curiosity. The geological stress on these structures must be immense, she murmured, her voice a soft counterpoint to the rhythmic tramp of the shinobi's boots. To maintain this level of integrity over centuries, the engineering principles are revolutionary, or it's that chakra, again, acting as a form of structural reinforcement. Kuretsuchi, who had been revived with a brusque splash of water from a canteen and was now walking stiffly at the front of the procession, shot a venomous glare over her shoulder. The back of her neck throbbed where Naruto had struck her, a constant, humiliating reminder of her defeat. It's called the Will of Stone. Professor, she bit out, the sarcastic drawl now gone, replaced by a cold, formal anger. Something you wouldn't understand. The tunnels opened into a vast, vertical cavern. Iwagakure was not a city spread out, but a city built down. Buildings that looked like angular, multi-storied beehives were carved directly out of the cavern walls, connected by a dizzying web of stone bridges and steep, winding staircases. The sky was a distant, gray patch of light far above, framed by the cavern's opening. It was a place of shadows and echoes, a city perpetually in twilight. Civilians, rugged-looking men and women with the stern, weathered faces of mountain folk, stopped and stared as their procession passed. Their gazes were hard, suspicious, and lingered on Naruto's crimson eyes with a mixture of fear and hostility. They did not stop until they reached the largest, highest structure, a formidable edifice that jutted out from the cavern's central pillar, adorned with the symbol of Iwagakure. This was the Tsuchikage's administrative center. They were led into a large, circular chamber. The room was stark, its only furnishings a low stone table and a single elevated seat that was less a throne and more a block of unadorned, polished granite. Sitting on that throne was a man who seemed as ancient and weathered as the mountain itself. Onoki of the both scales, the third Tsuchikage, was a diminutive figure, his small frame almost lost in the voluminous cage robes. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, dominated by a large, red nose and a thick, white mustache. But his eyes, sharp and intelligent beneath his heavy brows, held a formidable, weary power. He looked at them, his gaze lingering on his granddaughter's bruised pride, then on Juniper's strange attire, and finally settling on Naruto. It was a gaze that had assessed Cage, judged armies, and decided the fate of nations. It was utterly unimpressed. Kuretsuchi, Onoki's voice was a gravelly, surprisingly powerful rasp. You were assigned to a routine border patrol. You have returned with 2 unidentified trespassers, one of whom has apparently given you a lesson in humility. Explain. Kuretsuchi flinched as if struck. Lord Third, she began, her voice tight with professional deference, these individuals breached our territory through an anomalous energy event. They claim to have urgent intelligence regarding an imminent attack on Iwagakure. I engaged the male to test the veracity of his claim. He is formidable. To admit defeat was one thing. To admit it so plainly in front of the village council, a group of stern-faced elders who stood silently along the walls, was a profound humiliation. Onoki's gaze shifted back to Naruto. Formidable. A word my granddaughter does not use lightly. So, you beat up a Jonin of the Hidden Stone and now you expect an audience. He snorted, a dry, dismissive sound. You children and your games. I have seen formidable men turned to dust by a single jutsu. I have seen entire nations burn because of whispers and warnings from self-proclaimed saviors. What makes you any different? The fact that our warning is true, Naruto said, his voice calm and steady. Refusing to be baited by the old man's condescension. He met the Tsuchikage's gaze without flinching. And the enemy is not one you have faced before. Oh, not a rogue faction from Kumo. Or a power play from the brats in the mist. Onoki asked, stroking his mustache. Don't tell me that buffoon Danzo from Konoha has finally worked up the courage to try something direct. My back is already aching. And the paperwork for a new war would be the death of me. The enemy is from another world, Juniper stated, stepping forward. She held up her tablet, its glowing screen a stark anomaly in the stone chamber. They possess technology that allows them to traverse dimensions. We have direct evidence of their plan. The elders murmured amongst themselves, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outright scorn. Onoki simply raised an eyebrow. Another world. And what would that be, girl? The pure land of the dead. Have you come back to haunt us with ghost stories? No, Juniper said, her voice firm. Her scientific conviction overriding any intimidation she felt. A parallel universe. A reality with different physical laws, a different history. I am from that world. I am a scientist. A researcher of creatures you have never seen, called Pokémon. She tapped her screen, and a holographic image of the bouffalant Naruto had subdued flickered to life above the tablet. It was a small, grainy image. But it was clear enough. The elders fell silent, staring at the impossible creature. Onoki leaned forward slightly, his sharp eyes narrowing. A genjutsu, a summoning scroll, neither, Naruto answered. She is the proof of our claim. As is this. He took the reinforced data pad from his pocket and slid it across the stone floor. It stopped at the foot of Onoki's throne. One of the elders, a man with a heavily scarred face, picked it up gingerly, as if it were a bomb. He examined it, his frown deepening at the unfamiliar technology, before handing it to the Tsuchikage. Onoki took the device, his old fingers surprisingly nimble as he activated the screen. The map of the elemental nations appeared, the pulsing red marker over their very location. He read the mission directive. His expression, for the first time, lost its cynical amusement. A cold, dangerous stillness settled over the ancient cage. The air in the room grew heavy. Secure primary anchor, he read aloud, his voice a low growl. Target. Iwagakure. Extract or eliminate Tsuchikage. He looked up, his eyes boring into Naruto. Where did you get this? From the leader of the enemy cell we eliminated in my companion's world. Naruto explained. They had already established a gateway. We destroyed it, but not before we learned of their primary objective. They are coming here. A long, tense silence descended. The elders were now looking at Naruto and Juniper not with scorn, but with a dawning sense of alarm. The data pad was a tangible piece of evidence. The woman was an impossible anomaly. The boy had defeated their finest young jonin without breaking a sweat. The pieces of the story were insane, but they were beginning to fit together into a terrifying picture. Onoki leaned back, the data pad held loosely in his hand. His mind, a labyrinth of political strategy and battlefield experience, was working furiously. A threat from another world. It was the sort of thing he would have dismissed as a fairy tale in his youth. But he had lived long enough to see the impossible become reality time and time again. He had fought Madara Uchiha. He had witnessed the power of the tailed beasts. He was not so arrogant as to believe he had seen all the universe had to offer. This is either the most elaborate deception in the history of the elemental nations, Onoki said slowly, his gaze fixed on Naruto. Or we are facing a threat of unprecedented scale. In either case, I cannot afford to ignore it. He made his decision. You will be given quarters. You will not be considered prisoners. But you will not be free to roam the village. You will be under constant guard. His eyes flicked to his granddaughter. Kuretsuchi, you will be their minder. See to it that they are comfortable. And see to it that they do not so much as breathe without you knowing it. I want to know everything about them. It was a punishment disguised as a duty. Kuretsuchi understood immediately. She had failed in her assessment of their strength. Now she was tasked with assessing their character. She bowed stiffly. Yes, Lord Third. Onoki's final gaze rested on Naruto. I will have our sensor corps sweep the entire land of Earth. Our patrols will be doubled. If your enemy shows their face, we will be ready. But if this turns out to be a lie, I will personally ensure your death is slow and exceptionally painful. Am I understood? Perfectly, Naruto replied without a trace of fear. The quarters they were given were carved from the same living rock as the rest of the city. The rooms were Spartan but clean. The furniture simple and functional. The only window was a narrow slit high up on the wall, offering a sliver of the gray cavern sky. Two Iwa Anbu, their faces hidden by porcelain masks, stood unmoving outside their door. Inside, Kuretsuchi stood with her arms crossed, her expression a mask of sullen hostility. Don't get any ideas. The walls are infused with chakra-disrupting seals. And even if you could get past them, there are 100 shinobi between here and the surface who would love the chance to test their skills against the man who beat me. We have no intention of leaving, Juniper said, placing her bag on the stone bed. She looked at Kuretsuchi, her expression not one of fear, but of empathy. Your grandfather is a very cautious man. He's the man who has kept this village safe for 50 years. Kuretsuchi shot back defensively. He didn't get there by trusting every stranger with a sob story and fancy eyes who shows up on his doorstep. Naruto ignored their exchange. He was walking the perimeter of the room, his hand trailing along the stone wall. He wasn't looking for escape routes. He was observing, analyzing. His Rinnegan saw the faint, geometric patterns of the ceiling jutsu woven into the rock, a complex lattice of suppressive energy. He saw the patrol routes of the guards outside, their life flames moving in predictable, disciplined patterns. The flaw in your western perimeter defense, he said, his voice casual, as if commenting on the weather, is the number 3 guard tower. Its field of vision is partially obscured by that new retaining wall they built last year. A team of 2 could slip through the blind spot during the shift change at 0300 hours. They would have a clear path to the main archives. Kuretsuchi froze, her jaw tightening. She had written a report on that exact security flaw 3 months ago. It had been dismissed by the council elders as a low-priority concern. The fact that this outsider, this enemy, deduced it after a single walk through the city was both infuriating and deeply unsettling. How much else had he seen? Just because you got in a lucky shot doesn't make you a strategist, she deflected, her voice sharp. There was no luck involved, Naruto replied calmly, turning to face her. Just as there was no luck in my analysis. Your village is built for a direct assault. It is a fortress, but its weakness is infiltration. You rely too much on the strength of your walls and not enough on the unpredictability of your enemy. He walked over to the small table where Juniper was attempting to get a signal on her tablet. He watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Professor, your analysis of the enemy's technology. They favor stealth and surgical strikes. Sabotage. Their soldiers were not frontline grunts. They were special operations." "He's right," Juniper said, looking up at Kuretsuchi. "Their equipment was designed for minimal energy output and rapid deployment. EY disabled the power plant's security systems from the inside before they even set up their main device. They will not attack your gates, they will attack your heart." Kuretsuchi stared at them, a whirlwind of conflicting emotions churning within her. Her pride screamed at her to dismiss them, to call them arrogant fools. But her training, her instincts as a shinobi, knew they were right. The boy's tactical assessment was flawless. The woman's technological profile of the enemy made perfect sense. They weren't acting like invaders. They were acting like allies. The tense silence was broken by the wail of an alarm siren. It was not the loud, blaring signal for an external attack, but a series of sharp, piercing bursts, the signal for internal sabotage. Kuretsuchi's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "The forges," she breathed in horror. The Anbu guards burst into the room. "Lady Kuretsuchi, there's been an explosion in the foundry district. The main blast furnaces are offline." Before the guard had even finished his sentence, Naruto was moving. He was a blur, snatching his dark coat from the bed. "This is it. They're making their move. You're not going anywhere," the Anbu commander said, leveling a kunai at Naruto. "Don't be a fool," Kuretsuchi snapped, shoving his arm down. "He's the only one who knows what we're up against. I'm deputizing them. By order of the Tsuchikage's granddaughter." It was a massive overreach of her authority, but there was no time to argue. "You," she said, pointing at Naruto, "and you, Professor. You're with me. Let's go." They ran through the stone corridors, following the sounds of chaos. The foundry district was the industrial heart of Iwagakure, a network of deep caverns filled with the roar of furnaces and the clang of hammers. Now, it was a scene of pandemonium. Black smoke billowed from a collapsed tunnel. Shinobi were running everywhere, shouting orders, trying to contain the damage. As they arrived, a second explosion ripped through a nearby smelting tower, sending a shower of molten metal raining down. Kuretsuchi cursed, weaving hand signs. "Earth release. Rock shelter." A dome of rock erupted from the ground, shielding them from the deadly rain. "They're targeting the coolant regulators," a soot-covered Iowa shinobi yelled, running past them. "If Furnace 3 goes, it'll take the whole district with it." Naruto's Rinnegan cut through the smoke and chaos. He saw them. 5 of the cold, gray-green life signatures, the same as the soldiers in Castellia. They were moving with tactical precision through the industrial labyrinth, placing small, glowing charges on critical structural points. 5 hostiles. 2 on the upper catwalks, 3 near the main regulator valve for Furnace 3, Naruto reported, his voice a calm anchor in the storm. Kuretsuchi's eyes narrowed. "The 3 are mine. You take the 2 snipers on the catwalks. Professor, stay here and for God's sake, don't get killed." "My specialty is analysis, not combat," Juniper replied, already scanning the area with her tablet. "The charges they're using are plasma-based. They're designed to superheat their targets, not just explode. If you try to encase them in rock, you'll just turn the furnace into a pressure cooker." Kuretsuchi cursed again. Her entire arsenal was based on earth and lava release. How could she fight an enemy she couldn't touch? "Disrupt their weapons," Naruto said as he began to move. "They rely on their technology. It is their strength, and their weakness." He leapt, his movements impossibly light as he scaled a massive network of pipes, ascending into the smoke-filled darkness of the upper levels. Kuretsuchi, gritting her teeth, charged in the opposite direction, toward the heart of the crisis. She found the 3 soldiers near the main regulator, a massive, complex array of valves and levers. They turned as she approached, their futuristic rifles lighting up. She slapped her palms on the ground. "Earth release. Rock spikes." A forest of sharp stone pillars erupted from the floor, forcing the soldiers to scatter. One of them threw a small, glowing disc at her. It beeped ominously. A plasma grenade. Remembering Juniper's warning, she didn't try to block it. She leapt backwards as it detonated, releasing a wave of intense heat that melted the stone spikes into slag. Meanwhile, high above, Naruto stalked his prey. The two snipers were setting up a position overlooking the entire cavern. He moved along the underside of the catwalk, a shadow among shadows. One of the soldiers paused, his helmeted head tilting as if he heard something. Naruto chose that moment to act. He dropped from the ceiling, landing silently behind them. Before they could turn, he placed a hand on the back of each of their necks. He didn't drain their life. He used the path of dominion, a subtle but absolute assertion of his will. He didn't target their minds. He targeted the life force of the technology they were integrated with. The power packs on their rifles whined and died. The communication systems in their helmets crackled with static. The glowing lights on their armor flickered and went out. They were technologically deaf, dumb, and blind. They spun around in confusion, raising useless weapons, only to be met with two precise, disabling chops to the back of their necks. They collapsed without a sound. Down below, Kuretsuchi was on the defensive. The remaining two soldiers were flanking her, their plasma bolts forcing her to constantly stay on the move. She was trapped in a crossfire. One of the soldiers saw an opening and fired a charged shot. It was too fast to dodge. Suddenly, a plasma grenade, thrown from the soldier's own belt, landed at his feet. He stared at it in confusion for the split second before it detonated, engulfing him in a ball of white-hot energy. His companion whirled around, searching for the source of the attack, just in time to see his own rifle lift from his hands, turn in midair, and fire a bolt directly into his chest. Kuretsuchi stared, bewildered, as the rifle clattered to the floor. She looked up into the smoky rafters. Naruto dropped down, landing lightly beside her. "I told you their technology was a weakness," he said simply. He had used his power to seize control of their own equipment, turning their greatest asset against them. The immediate threat was over, but the regulator was still critical. Smoke pouring from a dozen ruptured pipes. As Iowa shinobi and engineers swarmed the area, Onoki himself arrived, floating on a small platform of rock. His face was a thunderous mask of fury. He surveyed the scene. The dead saboteurs in their strange armor, the damaged furnaces, and the trio at the center of it all. His sharp eyes fell on the neutralized soldier with a plasma burn in his chest. "My men reported you engaged the enemy," he said to Kuretsuchi, his voice dangerously quiet. Kuretsuchi opened her mouth to explain, but Naruto spoke first. "Lady Kerr, Atsuchi's quick thinking and powerful techniques pinned the enemy in place, preventing them from destroying the primary regulator," he stated, his voice carrying over the chaos. "She created the opening that allowed for their neutralization. The village's foundry is secure because of her." Kuretsuchi's eyes widened. He was giving her the credit. He was deliberately, and publicly, restoring the honor she had lost. He was saving her face in front of her grandfather and the entire village. Onoki looked from Naruto to his granddaughter, his expression unreadable. He knew Kuretsuchi's abilities. He also knew what he was seeing. This strange boy with the crimson eyes was not just a powerhouse. He was a tactician. He was a leader. And he understood the delicate, brutal politics of a shinobi village better than men 3 times his age. "Secure the area," Onoki commanded his men. "I want those bodies taken to T&I for immediate analysis. I want a full damage report on my desk in 1 hour." He turned his floating platform, his gaze lingering on Naruto for a long, calculating moment. "You two, back to your quarters. The debate over your story is over. Now, we plan for war." As they walked back through the less damaged corridors, a new, unfamiliar silence hung between Naruto and Kuretsuchi. The open hostility was gone, replaced by a grudging, complex respect. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice low. "Why did you do that? Give me the credit." "You are the Tsuchikage's granddaughter," Naruto replied, not breaking his stride. "The village needs to have faith in its leaders, now more than ever. My glory is irrelevant. The village's stability is not." He had said it like a simple tactical calculation, but Kuretsuchi felt the truth was deeper. He had understood her humiliation and had, in a single sentence, erased it. He had offered her strength not in the form of a blow, but in the form of respect. For the first time since she'd met him, she looked at the strange, powerful boy walking beside her and felt not anger, not suspicion, but a profound and deeply unsettling flicker of admiration. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Seven-Tailed Friend. The debriefing took place in Onoki's private war room. A chamber deep within the mountain where the stone walls were covered not in maps of the land of Earth, but in charts of the entire elemental nations. It was a room that spoke of a global, not a local, perspective. The atmosphere was thick with tension and the smell of ozone from Juniper's still-smoking analysis equipment, which had been hooked into Iowa's main power grid. The conclusion is irrefutable, Juniper announced, her voice echoing in the stone chamber. She gestured to a holographic display showing the intricate, non-ferrous circuitry of a saboteur's rifle. Their technology is powered by a refined, stable form of the same dimensional energy that constituted the portal. It's their signature. However, their biological components, she brought up another image, a celu. LAR scan of tissue recovered from one of the dead soldiers, are human, but they're saturated with Hashirama Senju cells. Onoki, who had been listening with a grim expression, stiffened. The name hung in the air like a curse. The first Hokage. Impossible. His DNA is one of the most guarded secrets in Konoha. Not to Orochimaru. It isn't, Naruto stated from the corner where he'd been observing. He has been experimenting with it for decades. He is the only one with the knowledge, the resources, and the complete lack of morality to orchestrate something of this scale. These soldiers are his creations, augmented with technology from another world. So, this dimensional invasion is just a mask for the ambitions of one of our own rogue shinobi. An elder scoffed. It is both, Naruto corrected. Orochimaru is the architect, but the power he is wielding is not his own. He has an ally, or a master, from beyond the rift. They provided the tools, he provides the army and the knowledge of our world's weaknesses. Onoki stroked his mustache, his sharp mind connecting the dots. The Jinchuriki, he said, his voice a low growl. The data pad mentioned an anchor. If they're trying to establish a permanent gateway, they'll need a colossal, self-sustaining energy source. The tailed beasts. Precisely, Juniper confirmed, bringing up a map of the elemental nations. Markers appeared over Kumogakure, Kurigakure, and a smaller, less-known village. The Eight Tails, the remaining swordsmen of the mist with their chakra-infused blades, and the Seven Tails in Takigakure. These are the most likely secondary targets. They are all immense, unique concentrations of energy. A heavy silence fell as the strategic implication became clear. This was not just an attack on Iowa. It was a coordinated assault on the world's greatest military assets. I cannot risk sending an Iowa platoon into another nation's territory, Onoki said, his voice heavy with the burden of command. It would be seen as an act of war. Especially with Kumo. We would be playing right into the enemy's hands, creating the chaos they desire. Then let me go, Naruto said, stepping forward into the light. All eyes turned to him. I am not affiliated with any village. I am a rogue entity. My movements will not trigger an international crisis. I understand the enemy, and I can approach the Jinchuriki in a way your shinobi cannot. You, an elder sneered. You are a child. That child saved this village's industrial heart not 3 hours ago, Kuritsuchi's sharp voice cut in. She stood by the entrance, her arms crossed, her gaze defiant. She had been silent until now, but her intervention carried weight. He understands this enemy better than anyone here. Sending him is our best, and only, option. Onoki looked at his granddaughter. Then back at Naruto. He saw the logic in it. A deniable asset of immense power. It was the perfect, if riskiest, political move. I will go as well, Juniper stated, pushing her glasses up her nose. My sensors are specifically calibrated to detect their technology. I can identify their stealth fields and track their energy signatures. I am your early warning system. And I'm going too, Kuritsuchi added, her chin jutting out stubbornly. This is a threat to our whole world. I'm not going to sit here polishing rocks while outsiders fight our battles for us. Besides, she added with a glare at Naruto, someone needs to make sure he doesn't cause a diplomatic incident all on his own. Onoki looked at the trio. The quiet, deadly boy with the god-like eyes, the brilliant, fearless woman from another world, and his own stubborn, powerful granddaughter. It was the most unorthodox team he had ever seen. And, he grudgingly admitted to himself, perhaps the most capable. Fine, He grunted. Go. Your first target is the closest and most vulnerable, the Seven-Tails Jinchuriki in the village hidden in the waterfall. I will provide you with supplies and diplomatic clearance. But once you cross our borders, you are on your own. Do not fail. The transition from the land of earth to the land of waterfalls was like stepping from a black and white photograph into a world of vibrant, overwhelming color. The stark, gray mountains gave way to rolling hills, then to a dense, humid jungle that pulsed with life. The air, once thin and abrasive, became thick and wet. Heavy with the scent of damp earth, sweet, decaying vegetation, and the perfume of 1,000 exotic flowers. The oppressive silence of the mountains was replaced by a cacophony of life, the chittering of unseen insects, the calls of brightly plumed birds, and the constant, pervasive murmur of running water. For Naruto, it was a sensory relief. His Rinnegan, which had been starved in the stone-dead environment of Iowa, now feasted on the lush tapestry of life around him. He could feel the slow, deep green pulse of the ancient trees, the frantic, shimmering energy of schools of fish in the streams they crossed, the very vitality of the air itself. The journey allowed for a new dynamic to form between the three companions. Naruto led the way, his steps silent, his senses extended, a watchful predator in his element. Juniper, surprisingly resilient, kept pace, her mind constantly working as she took readings, cataloging the flora and fauna with a scientist's delight. Kuretsuchi, Str. Ipt of her home field advantage and authority, was the pragmatic muscle, her senses sharp for conventional shinobi threats, her jutsu ready at a moment's notice. So, this Jinchuriki, Kuretsuchi saw it one evening as they made camp near a small, clear stream. Phew, I don't know much about her. Taki is notoriously isolationist. They act like a major village, but they're small, paranoid, and their only real asset is their Jinchuriki. They probably keep her locked up in a cage. A cage is a cage, whether it is made of iron or fear, Naruto commented quietly, his eyes focused on the fire he had started with a single, controlled burst of heat from his fingertip. What about you? Kuretsuchi asked, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. Those eyes, that power, you're no ordinary rogue. You fight like you were born on a battlefield. Naruto's crimson gaze met hers across the flickering flames. My battlefield was a laboratory. And my jailer was Orochimaru. He said it without self-pity. As a simple statement of fact. The admission hung in the air. Kuretsuchi and Juniper exchanged a look. They had known of his connection to the Sannin, but the stark reality of it, of a childhood spent as an experiment, cast his quiet confidence and lethal efficiency in a new, tragic light. He did this to you? Juniper asked softly, gesturing vaguely towards his eyes. He awakened what was already there, Naruto corrected. He was the catalyst, not the creator. He showed me the true nature of power. And he taught me that the only way to survive is to be stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than anyone who would seek to control you. Before the conversation could go deeper, Naruto's head snapped up. His relaxed posture vanished, replaced by the coiled stillness of a striking snake. We have company. Kuretsuchi and Juniper were instantly on alert. Naruto's eyes were focused on the path ahead. Two signatures, strong, inhumanly so, and they reek of death and money. They pressed on cautiously, and soon the sound of battle reached them, echoing through the dense jungle, the clash of steel, the roar of jutsu, and a youthful, defiant voice shouting. They broke through the T-Reese into a large clearing dominated by a colossal, ancient tree that seemed to hold up the sky. At its base, a young girl was cornered. She was perhaps 15, with short, mint-green hair, bright orange eyes, and a pair of insect-like antennae pins in her hair. She wore a simple white tunic and carried a large, cylindrical pack on her back. A fine, glittering powder, like insect scales, shimmered in the air around her. This was Fu. Her life force was a brilliant, chaotic flame of teal-colored energy, flickering with desperation but burning with a fierce, untamed will. And she was fighting or her life against two of the most infamous figures in the bingo books. One was a tall man in a dark Akatsuki cloak, his face concealed by a mask and hood, but his skin was a grotesque patchwork of stitches. 4 other masks, each representing a different elemental affinity, writhed on his back. Kakuzu of the 5 hearts. His life force was a discordant mess, 5 distinct, angry red flames crammed into one vessel. His partner was a leaner man, also in an Akatsuki cloak, worn open to reveal a muscular chest adorned with a strange amulet. He had slicked back, silver hair and manic, violet eyes. In his hand, he carried a massive, triple-bladed crimson scythe, Hidan of the Jashin faith. His life force was a single, fanatical, sickly purple flame that pulsed with a perverse joy in the violence. He stood in the center of a large, complex circle drawn on the ground in blood. Fu was bleeding from a cut on her arm, and Hidan was licking the blood from his scythe, a grotesque grin on his face. Got it. Now, the ritual begins. Prepare to know the exquisite pain of Lord Jashin, you little bug. Just get on with it, Hidan, Kakuzu's voice rasped, a sound like grinding stones. Her bounty is 30 million ryo. I want it before her village realizes she's gone. Patience, Kakuzu. Art takes time. Hidan laughed as his skin began to change, taking on a black, skeletal pattern. Fu, seeing the trap closing, beat the gossamer wings that had unfurled from her back, a gift of her tailed beast, and tried to fly. But threads, as thin and strong as steel wire, shot from Kakuzu's arms, ensnaring her and slamming her back to the ground. Nowhere to run, Kakuzu growled. It was then that Naruto's group intervened. Kuretsuchi was the first to act, a classic Iwa opening. She slammed her palms on the ground. Earth release. Mobile core. A massive section of the earth beneath the two Akatsuki members rose up, throwing them off balance. More insects. Kakuzu grumbled, steadying himself easily. Hidan, furious at the interruption, turned his manic gaze on the newcomers. Who the hell are you? You have just defiled a sacred ritual. Lord Jashin demands your blood as an apology. He charged, his scythe a crimson blur. Naruto met him. He didn't draw a weapon. As the massive scythe swung down, aimed to draw blood for Hidan's curse, Naruto's hand shot out and caught the thick shaft of the weapon. The impact should have shattered his arm, but his grip was like iron. Hidan stared in disbelief. No one just caught his scythe. Naruto's crimson eyes bored into him. His Rinnegan saw not just the man, but the intricate web of dark energy that connected him to the bloody circle on the ground. It was a parasitic jutsu, a life link forged through sacrifice. Your god is a thirsty one, Naruto said, his voice dangerously calm. But I will not let him drink today. With a surge of his will, he focused the path of ruin not on Hidan, but on the jutsu itself. A flicker of violet-black energy traveled up the shaft of the scythe. The blood on the blade, the catalyst for the curse, instantly turned to gray dust. The bloody circle on the ground sizzled and vanished, its power source severed. Hidan screamed, not in anger, but in agony. The backlash of his own broken ritual surged through him. He dropped the scythe, clutching his chest as dark energy refluxed into his system. My connection. What did you do? While Hidan was incapacitated, Kakuzu unleashed his full power. The stitches on his body burst open, and torrents of black threads shot out, a living tsunami of darkness. Jongu. Simultaneously, two of the masks on his back leapt off, forming into monstrous, thread-based bodies that unleashed a massive combination attack of wind and fire. Professor, the threads, Naruto called out, not looking back. They're conduits. Juniper, who had taken cover behind Kuretsuchi's rock wall, was already analyzing the attack with her sensors. He's right. They aren't just physical, they're channeling his chakra directly. Conventional defenses won't hold. Kuretsuchi gritted her teeth. Lava release. Searing migraine. She punched the ground, and a wave of molten rock surged forward, meeting the fire-wind combination in a massive explosion of steam and superheated air. While the two elemental monsters were occupied, Naruto faced the main body. The black threads swarmed him, seeking to pierce him, to tear out his heart. But Naruto didn't dodge. He stood his ground and held out his palm. Path of siphoning. Glutton's sphere. A sphere of violet-black energy, about the size of a melon, materialized in front of him. It did not repel the threads. It drew them in. As the living threads touched the sphere, they did not recoil, they were consumed. Their chakra, the very life force that animated them, was drained away, leaving them as piles of dry, inert twine at his feet. Kakuzu watched in horror as his ultimate technique, the one that had made him a legend, was being eaten. Impossible. What is that jutsu? It is not jutsu, Naruto said, his voice low. He took a step forward, the sphere of gluttonous energy pulsing in his hand. His Rinnegan was locked onto Kakuzu's chest, seeing the 5 distinct angry flames of his hearts. You have cheated death by hoarding life. Allow me to rebalance your accounts. He vanished. He reappeared directly in front of the stunned Kakuzu. His hand striking out not with a punch, but with an open palm that landed gently over Kakuzu's main heart. The siphoning sphere collapsed into his hand, and he unleashed its stolen power in a single, focused burst. But he wasn't targeting the heart itself. He was targeting the grotesque, stitched threads that connected it to Kakuzu's chakra network. The path of ruin, applied with a surgeon's precision. Kakuzu's eyes widened. He felt no pain, only a sudden, profound emptiness. The threads holding his primary heart in place decayed into nothingness. The organ, disconnected from his system, simply stopped. His main life flame flickered and died. He stumbled back, a look of utter disbelief on his face, before collapsing. The remaining 2 elemental monsters on his back shrieked and dissolved into piles of dust as their power source was cut off. In the span of 30 seconds, 2 of the Akatsuki's immortal members had been systematically and completely neutralized. Naruto stood over their defeated forms, then turned his attention to the person at the center of it all. Fu was on her hands and knees, staring at him. The glittery powder from her wings settled around her. Her aura, NGE eyes were wide with a mixture of terror, awe, and deep, ingrained suspicion. She had just been saved, but she knew how these things went. The monsters were gone, but now a new, far more powerful monster was here. He would want her tailed beast. They always did. She scrambled back, trying to put distance between them. Naruto did not approach her. He simply stood there, his crimson eyes regarding her. And for the first time, Fu felt something different. He wasn't looking at her like a weapon, or a prize, or a monster. He was just looking. You are Fu of Takigakure, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. She flinched, nodding slowly. And you are Chome, the 7-tailed horned beetle, he continued, his voice not changing, his gaze becoming slightly unfocused, as if he were looking past her, into her. The lucky 7. You have been sleeping for a long time, Great One. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Fu froze. Her mind went blank. No one had ever done that. No one had ever spoken to Chome. No one had ever spoken to her tailed beast as if it were a person, an entity worthy of respect. Most people in her own village didn't even know its name. Deep within her soul, in the vast, internal world of her subconscious, a colossal, armored insect with 7 dragonfly-like tails stirred. A voice, ancient and buzzing like a billion cicadas, echoed in her mind. Less than this human. He sees me. He speaks my name. Who is he, little Fu? Greater than. Fu couldn't answer. She was too stunned. Naruto's eyes refocused on her, and he offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. They hunt you because of the power you hold. They see you as a container. They are wrong. You are not one being, but 2. A partnership. A life force intertwined with another. It is not a curse. It is a symbiosis. A power that I, more than anyone, can understand. Tears welled in Fu's eyes. This stranger, this boy who had just defeated monsters with terrifying, impossible power, saw her. He truly saw her. Not the Jinchuriki, not the weapon her village feared and isolated. He saw Fu, and he saw her partner, her only friend, Chome. He saw them both, and he was not afraid. He understood. She scrambled to her feet. Her caution and fear washed away by a tidal wave of emotion she had suppressed for years. She ran to him, not to attack, but to stop just short of him, her orange eyes shining with unshed tears. You can really see him, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. As clearly as I see you, Naruto confirmed. Fu let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She beamed, a smile so bright and full of life that it seemed to light up the entire clearing. The melancholy of the jungle seemed to lift, replaced by her infectious, unrestrained joy. All right then, my name is Fu, and this is Chome. It's super nice to meet you. SSU. Kuretsuchi and Juniper, who had been watching the entire exchange with stunned silence, slowly approached. Kuretsuchi had never seen a Jinchuriki act like this. They were supposed to be sullen, angry, and dangerous. This girl was a ball of pure, unadulterated sunshine. Fu's bright orange eyes landed on them. Are these your friends? Are they strong too? They look super serious, she chirped, her energy boundless. Naruto's group had suddenly, unexpectedly, grown by one. And its entire dynamic had been irrevocably changed. The quiet, deadly warrior, the cynical Iowa prodigy, and the brilliant scholar were now joined by a force of pure, unbridled optimism. As Fu chattered excitedly, her wings fluttering behind her, Naruto looked at his new, eclectic collection of allies. His mission was to protect the world from an invasion. But here, in this jungle clearing, surrounded by these powerful, disparate women, he felt like he was starting to build a small world of his own. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Summit of Shadows. The Land of Iron was a world bleached of color. After the riotous, humid greens of the Land of Waterfalls, the transition was a physical and spiritual shock. Here, there was only white and gray. A thick, relentless snow fell from a sky the color of slate, not in gentle flakes, but in heavy, wet curtains that muffled all sound and clung to every surface. The great forests of cedar and pine were stooped and burdened, their branches laden with white, their greens reduced to dark, somber undertones. The air was razor-thin and cold enough to steal the breath, carrying the clean, sterile scent of snow and ice. It was a land of silence, of solemnity, a place where passions were frozen and only the hard, sharp edges of duty remained. Their path was a perfectly straight road, cleared of snow by some unseen, meticulous force. It led to a single, sprawling fortress nestled in a valley, its dark, oiled wood walls and gracefully curved multi-tiered roofs a stark black geometry against the endless white. This was not a shinobi village, a chaotic vertical fortress carved from rock or a bustling metropolis. It was a samurai's keep, ordered, disciplined, and built with an ascetic's appreciation for form and function. They were met at the main gate not by shinobi with hidden faces, but by samurai in full, traditional armor of lacquered black iron and deep blue cloth. Their faces were visible, stern and impassive, and they wore no headbands, only simple iron helmets. They carried no kunai, but the long, elegant sheath of a katana was sheathed at their hips. Their life flames, as perceived by Naruto's Rinnegan, were different from any he had ever seen. They were not the wild, fluid flames of shinobi, but perfectly still. Intensely focused spires of silver-blue energy, like the pilot light of a furnace, burning with a calm, disciplined heat. Their leader, a tall man with a severe topknot and a thin, gray mustache, bowed crisply. His gaze was sharp and missed nothing, from the tacky headband on Fu's forehead to the strange device in Juniper's hand. Lord Onoki sent word of your arrival, he said, his voice as crisp and cold as the air. I am Mifune, general of the Iron Country. The Cage are assembled. You have caused a considerable stir. He led them through silent, snow-dusted courtyards and along overed wooden walkways where the only sound was the crunch of their boots and the soft shush of the falling snow. Everything was clean lines, dark wood, and translucent paper screens. The atmosphere was one of profound, intimidating serenity. Fu, whose vibrant energy was a stark contrast to the monochrome world, shivered, though not from the cold. Wow, this place is super quiet, SSU, she whispered. Her usual cheerfulness muted by the oppressive solemnity. It is a land of meditation and steel, Kuretsuchi murmured, her own brash confidence seeming out of place here. They value order above all else. Try not to break anything. The summit chamber was at the heart of the fortress. It was a vast, hexagonal room. The walls were unadorned paper screens, and the floor was polished dark wood. In the center of the room, 5 figures were seated on simple cushions around a low, hexagonal table. There were no thrones, no banners, only the raw, condensed power of the 5 most powerful shinobi in the world. Onoki was there, looking even smaller and more cantankerous away from his stone throne. To his right sat a towering, powerfully built man with dark skin, white blonde hair combed back, and a small goatee. His arms, thick as tree trunks, were crossed over his chest, and he radiated an aura of explosive, barely contained impatience. This was the 4th Raikage of Kumogakure. His life flame was a raging, crackling thunderstorm of golden lightning. Beside him sat a much younger man with red hair, pale skin, and dark rings around his calm, turquoise eyes. A large gourd sat on the floor next to him. Despite his youth, he carried himself with an unnatural stillness and a deep, ancient sadness. Gara of the desert, the fifth cage. His life force was a vast, swirling sea of sand-colored energy, quiet but immense. And then there was the final cage. A tall, beautiful woman with long, auburn hair styled in an intricate, cross-like fashion. She wore a high-collared, long-sleeved blue dress, and her green eyes held a captivating mixture of warmth, amusement, and a deep, hidden melancholy. A faint trail of mist seemed to follow her, a product of her unique Kekkei Genkai. Maid Terumi, the fifth Mizukage of Kurigakure. Her life flame was a mesmerizing, swirling vortex of emerald green and searing crimson, a beautiful but deadly combination of water and fire. The fifth seat, the one for Konoha, was empty. The Hokage was not present. But there was a fifth presence. Standing behind the empty seat, silent and still as a statue, was a woman with straight blue hair, a single origami flower pinned in her bun. Her face was a beautiful, emotionless mask, and her amber eyes were cold and distant. She wore the black Akatsuki cloak with red clouds, a symbol of terror that made every guard in the room tense. This was Konan, the angel of Omegakure, representing her god, Pain. Her life flame was a color Naruto had never seen before, a pale, almost translucent lavender, folded in on itself 1,000 times. Like a piece of paper, hiding a core of profound, aching grief. As Mifune slid the paper door open and announced their arrival, all conversation stopped. 5 pairs of the world's most powerful eyes locked onto them. The collective pressure was immense, a physical weight that could crush a lesser shinobi. The Raikage was the first to speak, his voice a thunderous boom that rattled the paper screens. Onoki, what is the meaning of this? You call an emergency summit, claiming a global threat, and you bring a rogue ninja, a strange civilian, and a missing Jinchuriki to the meeting. Have you finally lost your mind in your old age? He stood up, his massive frame radiating pure killing intent. His lightning blue aura flared, and the air crackled with raw power. That is the Seven Tails Jinchuriki of Takigakure. Her unauthorized movement across international borders is an act of war. You have 30 seconds to explain yourself before I take her, and your heads, back to Kumo for interrogation. Sit down and silence your braying, Onoki rasped, not bothering to stand. Your muscles have clearly squeezed the blood from your brain. If you had the patience of a stump, you would see this as the very reason we are here. I see a power play from a decrepit old fence-sitter. The Raikage roared. Gentlemen, please, Gara's calm voice cut through the tension. He had not moved, but his presence was a calming anchor in the storm. The Raikage's concerns are valid, but Lord Onoki would not have taken such a risk without cause. Let them speak. Maid Terumi had not spoken a word. Her gaze had swept over the newcomers, past the defiant Kuretsuchi, the nervous Fu, and the analytical Juniper. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, had settled on Naruto. She took in his calm demeanor. The way he stood unbowed before the collective might of the cage, and the hypnotic, unsettling power in his crimson eyes. A slow, intrigued smile played on her lips. She saw not a rogue, but a typhoon in a bottle. A variable of immense power that had just been dropped onto the world's chessboard. I must admit, I am curious, she said, her voice a smooth, melodic charm th. It seemed to momentarily soothe the Raikage's fury. It's not every day a man walks into a cage summit with such an eclectic collection of companions. Especially one who seems to have garnered the personal attention of the Akatsuki. She nodded her head slightly towards Konan, who had remained utterly silent, her cold amber eyes fixed solely on Naruto's Rinnegan. Naruto stepped forward, drawing all attention to himself. He met the Raikage's glare with an unnerving calm. My name is Naruto. Fu of Takigakure is with me because she was being hunted by the Akatsuki. I intervened. She is now under my protection. Your protection? Scoffed. Who are you to offer protection? You look like a half-starved orphan who stumbled into a dojutsu. I am the one who neutralized Kakuzu and Hidan, Naruto stated simply. The chamber fell silent. Even the Raikage's bravado seemed to momentarily falter. The two, immortal, Akatsuki members were legendary, a plague that had terrorized the nations for years. To claim to have defeated them both was a boast of incredible arrogance. But there was no arrogance in Naruto's voice. Only the cold, hard weight of fact. Kuretsuchi stepped forward. It is the truth. I witnessed it myself. Onoki nodded. My granddaughter's word is bond. The boy is not lying. Mei's smile widened. My, to fell 2S rank criminals, and so young, too. I do hope all the interesting men in the world haven't decided to be born in this generation. It's so hard to find a good one. Her words were light, flirtatious, but her eyes were conducting a sharp, political analysis. He was powerful, vouched for by Iwa, and now the protector of a Jinchuriki. He was a new, independent power. Naruto ignored her flirtations, his gaze sweeping the room. We are not here to debate my history. We are here because the Akatsuki are not the only threat. They are a symptom of a larger disease. A new enemy has emerged, one that uses Orochimaru's research and technology from another world to move unseen. They attacked Iwagakure, and their ultimate goal is to capture the tailed beasts to power a permanent gateway to our world. An invasion is coming. He gestured to Juniper. This is Professor Juniper. She is a scientist from that other world. She is our proof, and our expert on their technology. Juniper, looking deeply out of her element but resolute, activated her tablet. A holog. Rafik display of the saboteurs, plasma weaponry and dimensional energy signatures filled the air above the table. The cage, even A, stared in stunned silence at the impossible technology. It was Conan who finally spoke. Her voice as soft and quiet as falling snow, yet it cut through the room with the sharpness of glass. Another world, another lie. There is only this world, and the pain it contains. Her amber eyes, cold and filled with an unwavering, dogmatic certainty, were fixed on Naruto. You speak of threats, but you are the greatest threat in this room. That dojutsu, it is a mockery of the eyes of a god. The Rinnegan belongs to pain. It is the tool that will bring peace to this broken world. You are an aberration, an impossibility that must be erased. Before anyone could react to her declaration of war, it began. There was no sound, no warning. The paper screens that formed the walls of the chamber suddenly dissolved. Not into ash, but into a billion tiny pieces of paper, a BL. Izard of white that swirled into the room, obscuring all vision. Simultaneously, the wooden floor beneath them exploded upwards, not from a bomb, but from thousands of explosive tags that had been camouflaged as wood grain. Detonating in a chained, rolling thunder. The cage reacted with inhuman speed. Gaara's sand surged from his gourd, creating a defensive sphere around him. The Raikage's body erupted in a cloak of crackling lightning, making him a living weapon. Mei spat a glob of viscous liquid, creating a wall of thick, sticky syrup to absorb the blast. Onoki leapt into the air, his hands glowing. But they were reacting to the diversion. Through the swirling chaos of paper and smoke, the true attack came. It was not aimed at the cage. It was aimed directly at the center of the room. Conan had risen into the air, vast. Beautiful wings made of pure white paper unfurling from her back. She looked down on the chaos, an avenging angel in the eye of a storm of her own creation. The tailed beast is a resource for peace. The false Rinnegan is a blasphemy. By the will of pain, they will be taken. From the swirling paper blizzard, dozens of figures coalesced. They were not human. They were massive, stitched together abominations, Orochimaru's grotesque experiments, their bodies augmented with the gray-green soldier's technology, plasma cannons fused to their arms. They charged the cage and their bodyguards. Their only purpose to sow chaos and keep the world's leaders occupied. But Conan herself, along with a massive, bird-like paper creation, descended directly towards Fu and Naruto. Fu, behind me, Naruto commanded. He pushed her back towards Kuretsuchi and Juniper. He stood his ground, his crimson eyes glowing in the dim, paper-filled light, fixed on the descending angel. Paper chakram. Conan sent a volley of razor-sharp, spinning discs of hardened paper at him. Naruto didn't move. He held up a hand, and a shimmering, invisible shield of force, the path of dominion, materialized in front of him. The paper chakram struck the shield and disintegrated, their chakra violently repelled. But as they dissolved, Naruto's eyes widened slightly. His Rinnegan saw it. He saw the faint, infinitesimally small traces of life force woven into every single sheet of paper. It was not just chakra-infused paper, it was imbued with her very will, her grief, her unwavering faith in her god. Her jutsu was a part of her soul made manifest. Your technique is an extension of your life, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the din of battle. But you have given your life to a hollow cause. You know nothing of our cause. Conan's voice was ice. You have not known true pain. She clapped her hands together. The billions of paper fragments in the room suddenly stopped swirling and coalesced, forming into a massive, swirling torrent that surged towards Naruto like a tidal wave. Paper release. Paper tsunami. Juniper, who had taken cover with Fu and Kuretsuchi, was staring at her tablet. Her fingers flying. Naruto. Her paper is responding to a single, high-frequency chakra signal. It's like a hive mind. If you can disrupt the signal, you can disrupt the entire jutsu. Naruto didn't need the advice, but it confirmed his own observation. He couldn't siphon the life from a billion individual sheets of paper, but he could target the one life that controlled them all. As the paper tsunami bore down on him, threatening to drown him in a sea of razor blades, he didn't retreat. He charged into it. His body was enveloped in a shroud of the violent, violet-black energy of the path of ruin. The aura acted as a shield, the paper dissolving into inert pulp as it touched the decaying energy. He moved through the wave, a phantom of destruction, heading directly for the woman at its heart. He burst through the other side, appearing directly in front of the airborne Conan. He reached for her. She was faster. Her body dissolved into thousands of sheets of paper, flowing around him like water around a stone, before reforming behind him. A dozen sharp paper spears materialized, aimed at his back. But Naruto had anticipated it. He spun, his hand grabbing not at her, but at the air where she would reform. He seized control of the space, of the very life energy within the atmosphere, with the path of dominion. Universal pull. Conan's paper form, which should have flowed freely, was suddenly caught in an invisible, irresistible gravitational field. The sheets of paper were yanked from her control, pulled violently towards his hand. She was forcibly reassembled from her dispersed state, her eyes wide with shock as she was dragged towards him. He caught her by the front of her cloak, their faces inches apart. His glowing crimson eyes, rippling with concentric rings, stared directly into her cold, amber ones. Your god offers a peace born of terror and death, he said, his voice low and intense, meant only for her. He uses his Rinnegan to take life, to inflict pain to prove a point. A child's tantrum on a global scale. He brought his other hand up, and a soft, gentle, violet light emanated from his palm. He did not touch her. He simply held it over the origami flower in her hair. My Rinnegan takes life only to protect life. And it can see the life you hide. The flower in her hair was made of the same paper as her jutsu. It was infused with the same core of her being. Through it, he extended his perception, his path of genesis, not to read her mind, but to read her soul. And he saw it. A flash of 3 children huddled in the rain. Yahiko's defiant smile. Nagato's gentle kindness. A shared dream of peace, a dream that had been drowned in blood and twisted into a nightmare. He saw the profound, unending grief that fueled her loyalty. Conan gasped, stumbling back as he released her. He had not seen her memories, but he had seen the emotion that defined them. He had seen her pain. And he had not used it against her. He had acknowledged it. That single moment of hesitation, of dawning confusion, was the opening her enemies needed. A massive sand hand, Gaara's, erupted from below, slamming into the paper bird she had been using as a distraction. A searing beam of lava from Mei's mouth forced Conan to ascend rapidly. The cage were beginning to overwhelm her diversions. Conan looked down at the chaos, then back at Naruto. He stood there, not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a profound, terrifying question mark that threatened the entire foundation of her world. With a final, conflicted look, she beat her paper wings, dissolving into the snowy sky. The abominations she had summoned collapsed, their chakra links severed. The Akatsuki had retreated. The battle was over. The summit chamber was a wreck of sand, melted slag, and inert paper pulp. The cage and their guards stood panting amidst the destruction. The immediate threat was gone, but the room was filled with a new, far more potent tension. They had all seen it. They had witnessed Naruto's power. His unique and terrifying application of an ability they thought they understood. They had seen him go head-to-head with the Akatsuki's second-in-command and force her to retreat. He was not just a rogue. He was not just a protector. He was a power on par with a cage, beholden to no village and operating by his own rules. Every eye in the room, A's suspicious glare, Gaara's calm assessment, Onoki's calculating gaze, and Mei's deep, intrigued stare, was now fixed on him. Naruto stood at the center of the wreckage, the quiet fulcrum around which the world was now turning. The Akatsuki had failed to capture him, but they had succeeded in one thing. They had dragged him out of the shadows and placed him squarely on the world stage. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Charm of the Bloody Mist. The aftermath of the Akatsuki's attack was a tableau of stunned silence and simmering power. The Great Chamber, a testament to the Land of Iron's serene neutrality, was now a ruin of scorched wood, molten slag, and drifts of inert paper pulp that resembled dirty snow. In the center of it all stood Naruto, the calm eye of a political hurricane. The cage were no longer looking at a curiosity. They were looking at a king on a chessboard that had, until moments ago, belonged only to them. The Raikage, was the first to break the spell. His lightning cloak subsided, but the storm remained in his eyes. He looked from the wreckage to Naruto, his expression a complex mixture of fury, disbelief, and a new, grudging respect. You, boy, you have made a powerful enemy today. And perhaps, he added, his voice a low rumble, a powerful impression. He turned to his guards. We are leaving. Konoha's weakness and Akatsuki's audacity have made this summit a farce. We will handle our own security. With a final, sharp glare at Naruto, he stormed from the room, his very presence seeming to tear a hole in the fragile peace. Gaara simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. The sand will bolster its defenses. Naruto, your warning has been heeded. Be careful. The path you walk is a lonely one. He and his retinue departed, their movements as silent and fluid as shifting dunes. Onoki grunted, pushing himself to his feet. A mess. A complete mess. He looked at Kuretsuchi, then at Naruto. Your mission is not over. The threat to the other Jinchuriki remains. But you have drawn the eye of the storm to yourself. From now on, you are not just the hunter, you are also the hunted. He turned to leave, then paused. Boy, what you did for Kuretsuchi's honor in Iowa, that was the mark of a leader. Not just a warrior. Do not forget the difference. With that, the old Tsuchikage and his shinobi were gone, leaving only one cage remaining. Mei Terumi had not moved. She sat idst the chaos as if it were her private garden, her expression one of deep, thoughtful amusement. She watched Naruto, her chin resting on her hand, her green eyes sparkling with an intelligence that was far more captivating than her beauty. Well, she said, her voice a warm, sultry melody that filled the ruined chamber, that was certainly more exciting than the usual squabbling over trade tariffs and border disputes. She rose gracefully, the mist clinging to her dress swirling as she moved. She walked towards Naruto's group, her body language open and disarming, yet her eyes were conducting a keen, strategic assessment. It seems our esteemed colleagues have been scared back to their respective fortresses, she continued, her gaze sweeping over them. A predictable, if understandable, reaction. But locking the gates after the wolf has already learned how to pick the lock is a fool's strategy. Her eyes settled on Naruto. You, on the other hand, are not predictable at all. You do not run. You do not hide. You face the storm head-on. It's a quality I find exceptionally rare. The storm will find you whether you face it or not, Naruto replied, his voice even. Better to choose your own ground for the battle. Mei's smile widened, a genuinely delighted expression that briefly chased the melancholy from her eyes. Precisely. Which is why I am not returning to Kurigakure to simply wait for the sky to fall. I am making an offer. She looked directly at him, her tone shifting from charming to businesslike, though the warmth never entirely left her voice. Come to Kurigakure. My village is in a state of transition. We are still healing from the wounds of the fourth Mizukage's reign. My authority is strong, but not absolute. There are still factions loyal to the old ways, to the bloody mist. They would see our recent peace as a weakness. She took another step closer, her scent a subtle mix of sea salt and night-blooming jasmine. This new enemy, this alliance between Orochimaru and another world, is the perfect catalyst for them. They will use the fear of this invasion to undermine my reforms and drag us back into isolation and bloodshed. I need to root them out. And I need to do it quickly and quietly. You possess a unique set of skills, an understanding of this enemy, and the power to act without the constraints of Kiri's political structure. In exchange for your help, I will grant you full access to Kirigakur's intelligence network, the best in the world when it comes to the Akatsuki and Rogue Shinobi. I will give you resources, a safe harbor, and a powerful ally in the coming war. What do you say? It was a masterful political move, delivered with the charm of a personal invitation. Kuretsuchi recognized it immediately, her eyes narrowing. You want to use him as your personal attack dog, to settle your village's internal squabbles. I want to secure my village so that we may be a stable ally in the fight to come, Mei countered smoothly, not taking her eyes off Naruto. And I believe in paying for talent. Your attack dog would have the full backing of a Cajun, one of the 5 great shinobi nations. A far better offer than Wanderin. The wilderness waiting for the next S-rank assassin to show up, wouldn't you agree? Naruto considered her. His Rinnegan saw the swirling vortex of her life flame, the emerald green of her boil really. Ace intertwined with the searing crimson of her lava release. But beneath the power, he saw the faint, gray web of weariness. The burden of leadership, the constant fight against her own people's history, was a heavy one. She was not offering him a job, she was asking for help. Her proposition was strategically sound. They needed intel, and a secure base of operations was invaluable. We accept, Naruto said, his decision made. Mei's smile became genuine. Excellent. I shall have my ambassador arrange the transport. I do hope you enjoy the mist. Kirigakur was a village born from the sea and the fog. As their ship cut through the perpetually mist-shrouded waters of the Land of Water, the village emerged from the gray veil not as a single entity, but as a series of interconnected islands and towering, organically shaped structures that seemed to defy gravity. The buildings were not carved from stone or built of wood, but appeared to be grown, their walls a pearlescent, shell-like material that swirled in gentle curves. Their towers resembling colossal formations of coral or the spires of sea-worn rock. Water was everywhere, in cascading waterfalls that fell from the upper levels into turquoise lagoons below. And in a network of canals that served as streets, plied by silent, single-oared skiffs. The air was thick with the taste of salt and the sound of distant, mournful foghorns. It was beautiful, but it was also suffocating. The mist was a physical presence, clinging to their clothes, dampening sound, and creating a sense of isolation, as if the rest of the world ceased to exist beyond the gray curtain. The people they saw were wary, their gazes quick and suspicious. Scars were common, and many of the older shinobi had the dead, haunted eyes of men who had been forced to kill their friends to survive. The shadow of the bloody mist was a palpable thing, a chill that the humid air could not warm. They were met by a young man with spiky blue hair and a shy, nervous demeanor. He carried a long, twin-hilted sword wrapped in bandages on his back. Lady Mizukage, welcome back, he stuttered, bowing low. I am Chojuro. I will escort our guests to their quarters. Thank you, Chojuro, Mei said with a warm smile that seemed to momentarily make the young man forget how to breathe. Their quarters were in one of the highest spires, offering a panoramic, if misty, view of the village. As soon as they were alone, Kuretsuchi began a security sweep, her pragmatic Iwa instincts kicking in. This place gives me the creeps, she muttered. It's too quiet. Everyone looks like they're waiting for someone to stab them in the back. The psychosocial trauma of a generation-long civil war is not easily healed, Juniper commented, her tablet already out as she analyzed the unique architecture. The very design of this place, with its winding paths and limited visibility, encourages paranoia. It's a tactical nightmare. That evening, they were summoned to Mei's office. It was a large, airy chamber at the very top of the central spire, with a balcony that overlooked the entire village. Here, for the first time, they were above the thickest layer of the mist, and the setting sun painted the clouds in hues of orange and purple. Mei stood on the balcony, her back to them, looking out at her village. Every evening, I stand here and I wonder how many of the people below me still toast to the memory of Yagura, she said, her voice soft and heavy. How many of them see my reforms, the abolition of the graduation death matches, the treaties with other villages, as a betrayal of our strength. She turned, her expression serious. The conspiracy is led by a man named Jinin Akebino. He is the last of the old guard of the 7 ninja swordsmen. He believes the Leige Nadari blades should only be held by those who have proven their bloodlust, who embody the old ways. He sees me as a weak, soft-hearted woman who is selling our village's soul for a fragile piece. He is charismatic, and many of the older Jonin, who feel obsolete in this new era, are drawn to him. So you want me to eliminate him, Naruto stated. No, Mei replied instantly. If I simply have him assassinated, he becomes a martyr. His followers will rally, and I will have a civil war on my hands. He must be discredited. His own people must turn against him. He must be exposed as a hypocrite, a man who betrays the very principles he claims to uphold. I want his movement to die not with a bang, but with a whimper of shame. It was a far more complex task than a simple assassination. It required subtlety, intelligence, and a deep understanding of the enemy's psyche. It was a test. What is his most cherished principle? Naruto asked. Mei smiled, a cold, sharp expression. Purity. The pure, unadulterated strength of Kurigakure. He despises outsiders and believes any reliance on foreign powers is a stain on Kiri's honor. To him, Orochimaru is a disease, and the idea of an enemy from Annette. Her world is a fairy tale used by the weak to justify alliances. Naruto nodded slowly, the pieces already beginning to click into place in his mind. Professor, what can you tell me about the 7 swords? Is their power rooted purely in their design, or is there more to it? An excellent question, Juniper said, her eyes lighting up with academic zeal. Chojuro was kind enough to allow me to take some non-invasive scans of his sword. Hiramakere. The blades are not simply well-forged metal. They are permeated with a unique, symbiotic chakra signature. It's as if the swords themselves have a rudimentary form of life. They bond with their wielder on a cellular level, which is why they are so difficult for others to use effectively. They are alive, Naruto mused. And like any living thing, they can be influenced. A plan, audacious and elegant in its cruelty, began to form in his mind. Over the next 2 days, Naruto's group became a subtle but pervasive presence in the village. Kuretsuchi, using her Iwa-honed stealth skills, shadowed Jinin's lieutenants, mapping their movements and gathering information on their routines. Fu, with her disarming, cheerful nature, befriended the younger academy students and Genin. Listening to their hopes for a new Kiri and, more importantly, the fearful whispers they overheard from their parents about the old ways. She became an unintentional, but highly effective, barometer of the village's generational divide. Naruto himself did very little. He was seen meditating on high balconies, or walking through the misty canals with Juniper, discussing her findings. He projected an aura of calm, detached observation. But his Rinnegan was always active, always watching. He observed Jinin from a distance, not his actions, but his life flame. It was a rigid, brittle spear of angry, prideful energy, a singular, unchanging color. The flame of a zealot. A man incapable of compromise. A man whose pride was both his greatest weapon and his most exploitable weakness. On the 3rd night, he put his plan into motion. Jinin Akebino and his inner circle were meeting in a secret chamber in the village's old training grounds, a place where the blood of generations of slaughtered students had soaked into the very stone. The Mizukage grows weaker by the day, Jinin sneered. He was a powerfully built man with a cruel face and the symbol of T. He 7 swordsmen tattooed on his shoulder. She brings foreign filth into our village, relying on outsiders to solve her problems. She dishonors us all. Her new pet, the one with the strange eyes, what of him? One of his lieutenants asked. A trick, a genjutsu user from Konoha, no doubt, Jinin scoffed. When the time is right, I will take his head myself and present it to her as a reminder of what true Kiri strength looks like. Suddenly, the torches in the chamber flickered. A cold wind, impossible in the sealed room, swept through. A single sheet of paper, a missing person's notice for a genin who had disappeared weeks ago, floated down from the ceiling and landed on the table. What is this? Jinin growled. Then, a voice, cold and sibilant, echoed through the chamber. It was a voice they all recognized with a primal fear. Orochimaru's. Such loyalty, such conviction. You will make a fine vessel for my plans, Jinin-kun. The conspirators leapt to their feet, drawing their weapons. But there was no one there. Then, Jinin's own Tonto, a masterwork blade given to him by the third Mizukage, lifted from its sheath at his waist. It hovered in the air for a moment, then spun and pointed its tip directly at his throat. Jinin stared in horror as his own blade, his symbol of purity and strength, turned against him. It was, of course, Naruto, hidden in the rafters, using a microscopic application of the Path of Dominion to manipulate the faint life force of the celebrated steel. Your village is a relic, Orochimaru's voice, projected by a subtle wind jutsu, continued to echo. But your swords have potential. I will take them, and I will take your bodies. A new 7 swordsmen, loyal only to me, will be born from your sacrifice. One of the lieutenants, a man whose brother had been one of Orochimaru's experiments years ago, screamed in terror and fury. You're in league with him. The Mizukage was right, you're selling us out to that monster. No, it's a trick, Jinin roared, but the damage was done. His own blade was menacing him. The voice of their most hated enemy was claiming him as an ally. And the final piece of Naruto's plan fell into place. The missing Genin's notice on the table began to glow with a faint, sickly purple light, the signature of Orochimaru's curse mark. This was Juniper's contribution. She had analyzed the curse mark's energy frequency and created a micro-emitter that mimicked it, which Kuritsuchi had planted in the room earlier. To the terrified conspirators, it was undeniable proof. Traitor! The lieutenant screamed, and charged not at the phantom voice, but at Jinin. Chaos erupted. Jinin's followers, their deep-seated paranoia and hatred of Orochimaru ignited, turned on each other and on the leader they now believed had betrayed them. The movement built on the ideal of purity was consuming itself in a fire of suspicion and fear. Naruto watched from the darkness for another moment, then slipped away, his work done. He met Mei on her private balcony. The moon was a faint silver disk behind the mist. She was holding a cup of tea, her expression calm, but her emerald crimson life flame was buzzing with anticipation. It is done, Naruto said simply. He will be arrested by his own men by morning. They will bring him to you, begging for forgiveness and pledging their loyalty. His movement is broken. Mei turned, a slow, breathtaking smile spreading across her face. It was not her political smile, nor her flirtatious one. It was a smile of genuine, profound admiration and relief. No battle, no bloodshed. You turned his greatest strength, his fanatical pride, into the weapon of his own destruction. You did not just defeat him. You erased him. She walked to him, stopping so close he could feel the warmth radiating from her. She reached up and gently touched the side of his face, her fingers cool against his skin. I asked for a warrior. But you are a king. Her life flame, that swirling vortex of power, softened. The weary gray web that had threaded through it receded, replaced by a warm, gentle glow of a color he had not seen in her before, a soft, hopeful rose. Gratitude, respect, and something deeper. Thank you, Naruto, she whispered, her voice losing its commanding, sultry tone and becoming something much more vulnerable, much more real. You have given my village a chance at a future. He looked down at her. At this powerful, beautiful woman who carried the weight of a nation on her shoulders. He had come here on a mission, a tactical alliance. But standing here, in the quiet mist, with her hand on his cheek and the scent of jasmine in the air, he felt the cold, hard lines of his mission begin to blur, replaced by the warmth of a connection he had not expected and did not know he was missing. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Angel's Doubt. The rain over Omegakure was weeping. Conan stood on the highest balcony of the tallest steel tower, the one that served as throne room and prison for the man she called God. The chakra-infused rain, an extension of his senses, slid off her paper-thin skin without leaving a trace of moisture. Below her, the city was a labyrinth of corroded metal and neon light, its reflection shimmering on the perpetually wet streets. It was a city of ghosts and grief, a monument to a dream of peace born from the crucible of unbearable pain. And for the first time in over a decade, she felt a crack in its foundations. Her mind was a maelstrom of conflicting images. She saw the tranquil, disciplined spires of the land of iron samurai. A peace maintained through order. She saw the swirling, misty beauty of Kurigakure, a peace fought for through reform. And she saw Naruto. She saw his crimson eyes, not filled with the cold, messianic fury of Nagato's. but with a quiet, analytical intensity. She felt again that moment of impossible connection, when he had not read her mind, but had seen her soul, the shared warmth of 3 orphans under a makeshift shelter. The vibrant, defiant hope in Yahiko's smile, the gentle sorrow in Nagato's eyes. He had seen the genesis of their pain, the pure, untainted dream that had existed before the world had broken it. And he hadn't used it as a weapon. He had simply acknowledged it. An enemy had looked upon her deepest wound and, instead of pouring salt in it, had offered a moment of silent, unnerving understanding. The memory was a persistent dissonance, a single note played out of key that threatened to unravel the entire symphony of her conviction. Paine's philosophy was built on a foundation of absolute certainty, that the world only understood the language of suffering, that true empathy was impossible, and that only the shared experience of terror could force humanity into an era of peace. Naruto's existence was a refutation of that entire doctrine. He wielded a Rinnegan, the eyes of the sage of 6 paths, yet he did not preach. He did not seek to rule. He sought to protect, and he did it with a surgical, almost gentle lethality that was a universe away from the indiscriminate, catastrophic power of the almighty push. Your thoughts are troubled, Konan. The voice was not Nagato's. It was the synthesized, emotionless tone of the Diva Path, the body of their dead friend Yahiko, which Nagato used as his primary vessel. The puppet stood in the doorway behind her, its face an impassive mask. Its Rinnegan eyes holding an empty, divine authority. Konan turned, her face as serene and unreadable as ever. I was merely contemplating the failure of the mission. We underestimated him. He is an anomaly, the Diva Path stated, its head tilting in a parody of curiosity. An aberration that defies the lineage of the sage. His power is a perversion. It must be studied, and then it must be reclaimed. His control is precise, Konan offered, choosing her words with the care of a surgeon. He does not use the 6 paths in the traditional sense. It is as if he has taken the core principles of the Rinnegan, the mastery over life and death, and evolved them down a different path. A more personal one. There is no personal path to peace, the Diva Path countered. Its voice resonating with Nagato's absolute, unwavering dogma. There is only the path. My path. He is a distraction, a final, dying gasp of the world's old way of thinking. We will deal with him. But first, the Jinchuriki. The Ghetto Mazo grows hungry. The 9 tails is our primary objective, but the capture of the 7 tails would have accelerated our plans considerably. Where has the boy taken her? Kurigakure, Konan answered. He has forged an alliance with the 5th Mizukage. The Diva Path was silent for a moment. Mei Terumi. The woman who speaks of peace while wielding 2 of the world's most destructive Kekkei Genkei. A hypocrite, like all the cage. It is of no consequence. The hidden mist is a fractured village. They will be no true sanctuary. Continue your observations. Track his movements. When the time is right, we will strike. The puppet turned and left, its footsteps echoing in the cavernous chamber. Konan remained on the balcony, the rain her only companion. A lie. She had told a lie of omission. She had not reported the most critical piece of intelligence. She had not told Nagato about the boy's unnerving ability to see into the heart of a person's pain. To tell him would be to admit that a form of understanding, of empathy, could be achieved without inflicting suffering. It would be to plant a seed of doubt in the heart of a god, a seed that might shatter the fragile peace of his certainty. The certainty that had been the only thing holding him together since Yahiko's death. She had protected him from a truth she herself was now struggling to comprehend. Her loyalty to Nagato was absolute. It was a pillar of her existence. But for the first time, she felt it diverge, if only by a single, terrifying degree, from her loyalty to Pain. Deep in a subterranean labyrinth, where the air was cold and smelled of sterile chemicals and turned earth, the lines between shinobi tradition and futuristic science had been violently erased. This was one of Orochimaru's primary laboratories. A place that would have given Professor Juniper nightmares. Glowing stasis tubes lined the walls, containing grotesque, half-formed things that swam in nutrient-rich fluid. Wires and cables, like metallic vines, snaked across the floor, connecting ancient ceiling scrolls to humming, advanced computer consoles. Orochimaru glided through the laboratory, his snake-like eyes gleaming with an intellectual fervor that bordered on madness. He was no longer in his familiar form, but inhabited the body of a young, healthy test subject, a temporary vessel to ward off the cell. Ular decay that was the price of his immortality. On a massive, central holographic screen, data streamed from a dozen different sources. Reports from the failed attack on Iowa, sensor readings from the clash at the Cage Summit, and most importantly, high-resolution bioscans of Naruto, captured by microscopic drones that had been released during Conan's paper storm. Kukuku. Fascinating, Orochimaru hissed to himself, his long tongue flicking out to taste the air. He zoomed in on an image of Naruto's Rinnegan, the crimson rings rippling with a power that made his very soul ache with desire. It is not a mutation. It is an evolution, a perfect fusion of Uzumaki vitality and something else. Something truly unique. He brought up another screen, showing a complex, swirling model of Naruto's life force. Psychic vampirism. The ability to directly absorb and integrate the elan vital of other beings. Not just chakra, pure life. It is the key to true immortality. No more messy vessel switching. No more cellular degradation. With his body, I could become a true god, not a parasite clinging to a chain of stolen lives. A figure stepped from the shadows. He was tall and wore the sleek, gray uniform of the dimensional soldiers. But his helmet was retracted, revealing the pale, emotionless face of Kabuto Yakushi. His features were sharper now, colder, and his eyes, hidden behind his familiar round glasses, held a new, reptilian stillness. He had clearly been subjected to Orochimaru's modifications himself. The reports from the summit are confirmed, Lord Orochimaru, Kabuto said, his voice a dispassionate monotone. Naruto-kun has allied himself with the Mizukage. Conan of the Akatsuki engaged him, but retreated. His abilities have been exposed to all the great nations. Let them see, Orochimaru chuckled, his eyes never leaving the screen. Let the sheep stare in awe at the wolf they failed to leash. It changes nothing. The cage are predictable. They will retreat to their fortresses, squabble amongst themselves, and prepare for a conventional war. They are playing checkers while I am playing a game that spans dimensions. Our benefactors are growing impatient, Kabuto noted, a subtle warning in his tone. They provided the technology with the understanding that the anchor would be secured quickly. The failure in Iowa was a significant setback. Patience, Kabuto, Orochimaru purred, turning to face his apprentice. Tell our otherworldly friends that a minor complication has arisen. The subject, Naruto-kun, has proven to be more robust than anticipated. But this is a good thing. A more powerful vessel means a more powerful god in the end, does it not? We are merely adjusting the acquisition strategy. His gaze became distant, lost in a labyrinth of his own intricate, horrifying plans. The cage believe I want the tailed beasts. The Akatsuki believe they are claiming the beasts for their own plan. They are all fools, dancing on my strings. The Jinchuriki are merely a diversion. A large, loud, and wonderfully distracting diversion. He gestured to another screen, this one showing a complex energy schematic that made Juniper's portal analysis look like a child's drawing. At its center was a single, terrifying image, a bioscan of Naruto, his unique life force signature highlighted in pulsating red. Why steal 9 separate batteries? Orochimaru hissed, a mad, triumphant glee entering his voice, when you can steal the one, perfect engine that can absorb them all. The true anchor is not a tailed beast. It has always been him. The invasion was never the goal. It is the bait. We will let him run. We will let him gather his little allies. We will let him believe he is the hero, fighting to save his world. And when he has exhausted himself, when he has drawn all of our enemies into one place, I will descend, and I will take everything. Kabuto adjusted his glasses, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. A truly elegant deception, Lord Orochimaru. Of course, it is, Orochimaru replied, turning back to the screen, his obsession absolute. After all, it is my masterpiece. Conan had left Omegakure, under the guise of a solo reconnaissance mission. She had traveled to the land of water. She moved like a ghost, her paper form indistinguishable from the mist. Her mission was to observe Naruto, to find a weakness in his new alliance with Kurigakure. But her true purpose was far more personal, and far more dangerous. She needed to understand. She found them not in a fortress, but in a small, secluded training ground on one of Kurigakure's outer islands. It was a place of serene beauty, with a waterfall cascading down a moss-covered cliff into a clear, tranquil pool. And in this place, she witnessed a scene that defied every law of her world. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing, his eyes closed. Around him, his companions were engaged in a unique, collaborative training exercise. Kuretsuchi was sparring with Fu. But it wasn't a true battle. Kuretsuchi, with her pragmatic, hard-hitting style, was teaching Fu how to ground herself, how to use the earth to anchor her flighty, aerial combat style. Lava release. Vulcanized rubber ball. Kuretsuchi created several dense, black, bouncing spheres. Fu, giggling, used her incredible speed and agility to dodge them, her wings beating the air, learning to predict their ricochet patterns. It was a sharing of strength, a blending of Iwa's unyielding earth and Taki's unpredictable wind. Nearby, Juniper was working with Chojuro, the shy swordsman. He was nervously holding his massive blade, Haramakere, while Juniper conducted a close-range scan with a handheld device. The energy output is inconsistent, Juniper explained, her voice filled with the passion of discovery. It spikes when you channel your own chakra, but it seems to fight you. Your own self-doubt is creating a psychic dissonance that the sword is reacting to. Think of it not as a tool you wield, Chojuro, but as a partner you're dancing with. You must trust its steps as much as your own. The young man looked at his sword with a new, dawning understanding. Akiri swordsman was being given tactical advice by a foreign scholar, and it was working. Conan watched this all from the high branches of a mist-shrouded tree, a silent, paper phantom. This was not a military alliance. It was not a gathering of assets. It was a team. A nascent, dysfunctional, and impossibly powerful family, drawn together by the strange boy at its center. And then she saw Naruto open his eyes. His crimson gaze swept the clearing, and then, without hesitation, looked directly up at the branch where she was hidden. He had known she was there the entire time. He didn't shout an alarm. He didn't signal an attack. He simply raised a hand and beckoned her down. Her first instinct was to flee. Her second was to attack. She did neither. Her doubt, her need to understand, was stronger. Her body dissolved into 1,000 paper butterflies that fluttered down from the tree, coalescing on the grass before him, reforming into her silent, watchful self. His companions instantly went on guard. Kuretsuchi stepped in front of Fu, her hands already forming a seal. Chojuro, with a newfound confidence, drew his massive sword. Juniper took a step back, her hand reaching for a defensive device on her belt. "Stand down," Naruto said, his voice calm, never taking his eyes off Conan. "She is not here to fight." He looked at her, his Rinnegan not reading her for threats, but for intent. "You have questions," he stated. Conan's face was an unreadable mask, but her lavender life flame, which only he could see, was a turbulent sea of conflict. "Your existence is a contradiction," she said, her voice a soft whisper. "You wield the eyes of a god, but you do not seek to impose your will upon the world." "Why?" "Because a will imposed is not peace," Naruto replied simply. "It is tyranny. A cage, no matter how gilded, is still a cage. True peace can only be built on a foundation of understanding. Of choice. Choice leads to conflict. Understanding is impossible." She recited the core tenet of Paine's philosophy. The words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Is it?" Naruto countered. He gestured to the mismatched group behind him. "Here stands a kunoichi from Iwa, a village your leader would have annihilated. Here is a jinchuriki, a weapon your organization hunts like an animal. Here is a scholar from another world, an anomaly that should be feared or dissected. Yet, here they are, working together, learning from each other, by choice." He took a step closer, his presence not threatening, but immense. "Your friend, Nagato," he looks at the world and sees only the cycle of hatred. He is not wrong to see it. It is there, but it is not all there is. He is so focused on the pain of the past that he is blind to the potential of the future. He seeks to burn down the entire forest to get rid of a single poison tree. He stopped, his crimson eyes holding a deep, profound sadness that seemed to mirror her own. The path he is on will not lead to peace. It will lead only to a world of ashes and ghosts, with him as its lonely king. You know this. Deep down, you feel the flaw in his logic. That is why you are here. Every word was a hammer blow to the foundations of her faith. He was not just fighting her. He was saving her. He was offering her the one thing she thought she had lost forever, a different choice. What is it you want? She finally asked, the question a quiet, desperate plea. I want to save my world, Naruto said, and I believe that your world, the one you, Nagato, and Yahiko dreamed of, is the same one. He has simply lost the map. I am not your enemy, Konan. Nagato's pain is. He turned his back on her then, a gesture of supreme, unconditional trust. He walked back towards his friends. The choice is yours, he said over his shoulder. Continue to serve a dream that has become a nightmare. Or help me build a new one. Konan stood frozen, the mist swirling around her. She was the angel of God, the second in command of the world's most feared terrorist organization. And she had just been offered not a truce, not a surrender, but a redemption. She looked at Naruto, standing with his strange, loyal family. She looked at the hope and camaraderie that flowed between them, an energy so alien to her world of shadows and rain. And she made a choice. Her body dissolved into paper, not with the sharp aggression of an attack, but with the gentle quiet of the falling rain. The butterflies scattered on the wind, leaving only a single, perfectly folded blue paper rose on the grass where she had stood. A message, a promise, a seed of betrayal that would, she now knew, blossom into salvation. Chapter 9 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.